Excuse me. Like to call the meeting to order. Please be advised that this meeting is being live streamed and archived. Approval of agenda, that the agenda for the regular board meeting of June the 11th, 2019 be approved. Moved by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Preliminary declarations of pecuniary interest. I'd like to call on Superintendent Judy Noble.
Good evening and welcome. It has become an annual tradition to provide updates to the board for our Rainbow International strategy. Much has transpired both in recruitment and within the community since we met with you last in March. Tonight is an opportunity to share with you a refresher on the Ontario International Strategy K-12, provide an update on recruitment and enrollment over the past school year, share with you some of the work that we have completed in regards to building community infrastructure, and let you hear from both Canadian and international students and their teacher the impact this program is having on education in Rainbow schools. Before we begin, it's a pleasure for me to bring up Director Blasig, who is going to introduce President Bill Best.
Thank you, Superintendent Noble. Bill Best is the president of Cambrian College. Bill was appointed to the role in August 2014 and has just recently renewed his commitment to Cambrian for a second 5-year term. Bill has worked in higher education for more than 20 years in a variety of progressive leadership roles, including Vice President of Finance and Administration, Vice President of Academic and Student Development, and Interim President and CEO at New Brunswick Community College in Fredericton. Bill has extensive experience with international recruitment of students at the college level. His experience and first-hand knowledge in this area has elevated Cambrian's standing as a leader in recruitment of international students in Ontario. Under his watch and his close participation, Cambrian's enrollment has grown considerably. He is here tonight to share his experience and strategies with international recruitment. So, it is with great pleasure that I introduce Mr. Bill Best, President of Cambrian College.
Good evening, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here and very grateful for the invitation to speak with you. Being an individual who does work with a board and sit on boards, it's kind of fun to be here today feeling kind of like the consultant. I come in, I have no responsibility, I have no accountability, and yet I get to talk. So I can't think of much better situation than this for me. Before I begin, I do want to recognize that Rainbow is a very valued partner of Cambrian College in a variety of different things, including Barry Down College that lives actually on our campus. We have countless students who have actually participated and graduated from your schools as well. And I'm a double parental graduate of 2 of my children out of Rainbow as well, and one quickly on the way to moving out of the home as a 3rd. So I'm here to talk about international, but I want you to have that in your mind as we're talking, that when you're talking about international students, you're talking about students. You're talking about students from around the world as if they're from down the street. And if you try to segment that conversation, and remember, I'm talking as a consultant with no accountability, no responsibility, you will miss the boat. Because in reality, you have to have an intentional strategy about the student experience, period. And it's not about international recruitment. From our perspective, we set it on a course of internationalizing the college. Those are 2 completely different objectives, and they're actually different goals at different levels. I often talk about 50,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 5,000 feet, and boots on the ground. And when you start off, you really have to have that thought process of, what are you trying to accomplish and why? And I will tell you that fundamentally, if you're doing it for the money, you need to stop. Because overarchingly, it's going to cost you money to get in the game, and then the money will come. As I learned from many a mentor in the business world before I joined higher education, you have to invest money to make money. And when you're looking at investing money, we're talking about people, you're talking about long-term commitment, because you don't fly into a fair in a country as an unknown and leave with students. It's a long-term process, and it's a commitment of an entire organization. It's from the top through every level of the organization, a commitment and understanding. If you're sitting here right now and contemplating internationalization and you have not traveled internationally, I would challenge you to be able to explain to me why you can weigh into the conversation, because you have not had the experience. So what I want to give you is some insight into, number one, what was it that we were trying to accomplish? And then try to give you insight into the experience that you'll probably hear from students firsthand, but I'll vicariously talk about it because I experience every day. And as a little bit of an aside, and I am a little bit like a shiny object kind of person, is that I'll give you an example before I begin about how I spent my morning. Now, I'll let you sit there and contemplate, okay, he's the president of a college. I'm sure he's in some stuffy meeting somewhere talking about budgets or something like that. Or I played cricket this morning. I played cricket with international students and staff. I learned how to ball. I learned about wickets. I learned about how to get 6 points for a home run as opposed to 1 point if we hit it out. I learned about all of these things because it's the individual experiences, that the commonalities, to talk with individual students that make the difference. It's not about books, it's about experiences. So in 2014, we had exactly, not that I'm a numbers person, 226 international students at Cambrian College. They're in a number of specific programs that I could probably count on one hand. Right now, in what year are we in? 2019, we have 1,200 international students from 32 countries, and we actually turn people away. And that's a very important point that you want to think about. But 4 years ago, we didn't set out to get 1,200 international students. We did not have any hard targets. We wanted to progress towards the internationalization of our college, and I'll explain why. So Canadians are awful at traveling internationally. Canadians who are students are awful at studying abroad. It's like 1% to 3% of the population. So I still remember going to China in my second year. It was an incredible experience. And how exciting for a new president to be going to China and knowing that I was going to check up on 7 students who were on placement from our programs at Cambrian. 6 of which were for ECE and 1 was from chemical engineering. I got to go on the high-speed train in China that goes like over 200 miles an hour. That's really cool, by the way. However, what I realized as I was leaving China is I wanted to have 5,000 people with me. The experience of 7 plus the group that I was with would not change the perspectives of the multitude and diversity of cultures that our students will experience in a global society. And I'll actually talk about for you to consider, and I know it's not like it used to be, and I'm a transplant to Sudbury, so I don't remember the good old days of INCO. I've heard lots of stories. However, the two major primaries are global conglomerates. If you're working for Valet, you're working for a Brazilian company. What we want to do is provide the opportunity for students to understand the global from a first-hand perspective. So when we said we want to internationalize the college, it wasn't that we wanted to internationally recruit, it was that we had to internationally recruit because we needed international students to help students from Mazilda to understand the world. Now let me give you what that means. That means that you're taking it from book learning to experiential. And I don't know if you've actually defined how you learn, but I know I personally learn by doing and experiencing. People can explain things all they want to me, and I just sit there and start to go yada, yada, yada. And as a result, when I was traveling abroad, was able to understand the experiences. So I take it back to my kids. When I went to Delhi in India, and I got off on at the airport, and I was told to go to Pillar 4. Delhi's really big, by the way, and I grew up in North River, Nova Scotia with a population of less than 1,000. So I just want you to think about that. Parry Sound would have been big to me. So I go to pillar number 4, and I'm standing there, and I'm waiting, and apparently a driver is supposed to pick me up. I didn't realize that at the Delhi airport, there are 2 pillar number 4s. So what I want you to have in your mind is that international students get on a plane with 2 suitcases, with everything they possibly have, to go to a foreign country, to arrive at an airport and have no idea what was happening. What if it was your kid? What if it was your child? What would you want to have happen? That has driven everything that we've done from a student services experience, because we say, well, what if it was your child? And if you're not prepared to provide that experience in a scalable way, then you're not going to be successful. And why is that critically important? So once again, the finance people will love what I'm going to say right now. So we went from the stage and phase of actually having in our mind that we wanted to recruit international students to be able to internationalize the college. However, we were mostly agent-driven. So agents help work with students to go through all the elements of arriving here. Based on the last 3 years, our percentage of students arriving through agents is decreasing dramatically. And the reason why is we're getting 2nd and 3rd generation of family and communities sending their children because of the experience that they have. To the point where agent fees are down 35%. I'll just give you, our budget's 100 million, so you can make whatever conclusions you want out of that. So what you have to understand is the world is small and the world is big. When we have orientation now, it is live streamed back to the homes around the world by the students. It's not anymore about a letter being sent to say this is the experience. If a bad experience happens on the first day, the entire community knows. So the pressure is huge. It's not coincidental. I believe that that's why our growth has happened in the way that it has, because we have never gone into a single semester with the orientation and the care and feeding the same. Because when you have 226 students, you handle orientation one way. When you then have 500 students starting in a January period, you cannot handle it the same way. So if you're not prepared to be nimble, innovative, and throw everything out that you just did the last time in order to be successful and be comfortable with that, you're going to be challenged in terms of where you go and what you do. So what does internationalization look like? Well, when you see it, you know it. It's not a bunch of words. What I can do is I can actually invite you to the hallways of Cambrian because you'll see it. So the actual thought process that we wanted to achieve, so power engineering, for instance, is one of our programs at the college. What we actually wanted to have happen is someone from Chemi to be in the, I'm showing off my Sudbury stuff as from away, somebody from Chemi to actually be in a class in a group of 4, and their partners. One is from Appawapiskat, because indigenization falls in the exact same, the parallels between indigenization and internationalization are uncanny. Somebody's going to actually be from Gujarat, India, and somebody's going to be from Honduras. And the goal for us with internationalization is they will become best friends. Because we can talk about diversity, inclusion, and understanding of multiple cultures and how to work for people that don't look exactly like us. It doesn't make any impact on decreasing discrimination and racism. But when you actually get to the point where they're your friends, that you work with them every day, and you're talking in depth about what their experience and their culture, it's a game changer. And so when you're looking at internationalization, it is not about student recruitment. Student recruitment is a necessary element to get to ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're only looking at it trying to say, well, how can we get the dollars? You will fail, because in reality, you need to invest those dollars into making sure the experience is destinational as opposed to coincidental. So where do we see it? In the last year, I'll give you 2 distinct experiences that have no writer's embellishment for David Letterman fans at all. Number 1, we had the first year, we've actually had individuals from a Muslim background who actually have their face concealed. And even at graduation now, I have to determine in a matter of 3 or 4 seconds whether or not I'm able to shake their hand. It's a very interesting dynamic, because their religion, in 2 individuals at convocation, they're not allowed to touch a male. So think of all the diverse changes that you have to have, thinking about everything that happens, and it happens like that. So walking down the stairwell, there are 2 individuals from a Muslim background. There is a atypical Caucasian from Canada, and there is somebody from India walking down the stairs as I'm trying to walk up, and they're all laughing together. That's internationalization. When I walk into the library and I see students congregating around, studying together, and I see international students that I believe 4 years ago would have been segregated into different groups on their own, high-fiving domestic students because they're friends. We gave away in September 2 tickets to a Blue Jays game. Hard to believe last September the Blue Jays would be doing better than they're doing now, but they were. And it was one of the things of the orientation where they won tickets. A domestic student, mature student, won the tickets. Invited an international student to go with him. That's internationalization. First ever ball game in Canada as a benefactor of a domestic student. That's internationalization. That's not student recruitment. Student recruitment is just a necessary element to achieve internationalization. And I implore upon you, before you go any further into the realm of where you're going, you need to decide what is it you truly want to accomplish, but more importantly, why. So we spent a lot of time talking at the college on these 3 simple words of why, what, how. If you don't know why you're in this, don't talk about what you want to do. And if you don't know why or what, do not talk about how. And the challenge is everybody wants to talk about how. They want to set quotas, they want to talk about countries, they want to talk about all different things. But if you can't resolve why you're even having this conversation, and if it's about finances, because I battle that all the time, sure, the money comes. Our international tuition now is exactly equal to our domestic tuition in terms of revenue. But it was never the goal. It just happened. So the moral of this story is, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for everyone. And it's not just about an international department or person or, shameless plug, half person. It's about everybody. And when I talked to Norm over the last number of years at breakfast, we had great conversations, I kept saying, your senior leadership has to travel internationally. If you haven't been there, you don't understand. You don't understand the idiosyncrasies. And even now, as I send senior leaders as well as deans and directors, they come back and they just say, okay, yeah, I know, Billy, you've just been talking like crazy over and over about this stuff. Now I get it. And they come back with 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of things that we have to change in everything that we do, because now they know. And I think that that's the significant part of this, is you're going to look for value of money. So it's a lot of money to fly to these countries. But it's all about relationship. Let me give you an example. I was down in the trades area, and I was walking back, and a student, international student, was walking beside me. So being who I am, I'm always saying, so what are you taking? Where are you from? And the default answer that they're used to giving is India, and then nobody cares after that. And I'm like, no. Where are you from? And he says, oh, no. You would not know where it is. It's a very small place. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm from a really small place too. Where are you from? And so I pull out my iPhone, I go to Google Maps, and I start trying to squinch down to the area of India. He says, well, it's beside Jalandhar. And I'm like going, okay, well, I was there. And it's kind of like going down. He said, yeah, it's this place, and I can't remember what it is, but the real impactful part, I said, well, how big is it? 5 million. So I want you to understand that we don't understand. Individuals are coming from an environment where our largest city in Canada is considered a small place. And now we're trying to have them come to Sudbury. I want you to really think about that for a second. This is not a easy leap of thought process. But it's significantly a da moment. So if we believe that we can compete directly as Sudbury with large centers, that's problematic. So one of the major changes we made in our recruitment strategy is that some people could say, and it's actually from some extent truthful, that Sudbury only being, depending on how fast you drive, 3.5 to 4 hours away from Toronto, we're in close proximity to Toronto. But when you have somebody that's coming from a city that's twice the size, or when I was in Chongqing, it was 30 million in one city. I'll let you kind of think about how big Canada is right now. And we're saying, yeah, I know, you might want to come somewhere small. They're thinking Toronto. A real small place like Toronto, that might be uncomfortable, but we'll give it a try. And then we're trying to say, well, what about Sudbury? So this is what we did, and it actually worked marvelously for us. We were very straightforward. When someone says they want to go to Toronto, no problem. This is how you go to Toronto. But if you want the authentic Canadian experience, come to Sudbury. If you're worried about safety, come to Sudbury. Big play, by the way, for countries worried about sending their female daughters over to Canada. Love sending to Sudbury because it is safer. Oddly enough, this is another interesting thing being from away, less pollution. Sudbury look at the skies and they go, wow, this is really great. And if you've ever been in Delhi during the time when up in Punjab they're burning the crops, the remnants of the crops, it's not fog, it's smoke. It's filling the air. So you think about quality of life, quality, etc., it's really big. So when you're looking at that part of it, what's your pitch? Because if it's come to Canada, you're not on the map. How are you going to get on the map? How are you going to be successful? What's your unique student experience that you can sell internationally when they have every possibility in Canada as an option? What makes you different? We've gone on the perspective that it's the experience we give, it's the customer care we give, it's a continuous element, and we're offering the authentic Canadian experience, which includes snow angels. They don't have that in those countries. Diversification. Let me give you this next point that you want to think about. You can't go to one country. You have to have a diversification strategy in terms of where you're going, what you're doing, and that's going to be intentional from a mechanics perspective. So from a registrarial perspective. These are learnings that we've had over the past 4 years, which is a matter of students when they get their visas, the processing time by the consulate general offices of each country are different. So if we didn't close different countries by different timelines, we would have everybody from one country. So instead, because we would fill up. But when you're looking at internationalization, so the revenue would be the same, right? So if revenue is your ultimate outcome, doesn't matter. But if internationalization is, and diversity and the education of multiple cultures for the students within your system, then diversification is a necessary outcome. So what we've actually begun to do, and very successfully in this last year, is we've started to close by country in order to be able to allow other countries to actually process. So basically, if one country processes all their applications within 3 months, and it takes 6 months for things to be processed at Honduras, Honduras is never getting in. And we can sit there forever flabbergasted by, well, geez, I don't know why our population's not more diversified. You know, it's the student's fault. It's not the student's fault. It's the processing methodology. So I take you back to where I started. I started my day today playing cricket. I go onto the field during orientation and I play soccer with the students. Yes, with a sports coat, still intact. I talk to the students, I experience, we make sure that we understand what's happening, and we have never, in a total of the last 15 semesters, we've never done the same thing twice, because you can't. Because the students that you have, the number, the diversity is different, and if you don't adjust, they won't come back. We invest and reinvest the dollars that we earn at a disproportional amount to ensure that our reputation on an international level is where we can be proud of and what we can do. And just for food for thought, and I'll pause to see if you have any questions, is you also must recognize that we come from an individualistic society. It's one of the most awe-striking over the mountain sort of moments. So North America, basically, so United States and Canada, individualistic societies, we want single rooms, right? Just put that as your example. The rest of the world is communal. They don't want single rooms. They want to be together. Everything about our society, if we try to say, well, how come there isn't conformance to the way that we do things, you will fail as well. because that's part of what we're learning, but we have so many misconceptions, assumptions, and downright, I won't use those words, bad things, that you have to be willing to step out into the world which you will be extremely criticized, internally and externally, for what you're doing. I know at Cambrian, we've changed not just the look in the face of our college, but the look in the face of our community. I very seldom can go to most of our retail outlets and not run into one of our students. When we first started increasing our international population, employers wouldn't hire them. When we first had faculty have internationals the first time, they were very concerned. We supported them, they worked through it, and now we have faculty going, how come we can't have international students? Because we're missing out. There's a huge quickening, there's a huge risk. You're opening yourself up to criticism, and it's much easier to stay in port and not go out fishing, East Coaster. However, I will guarantee you that if you take this road in the right way, you, not only the school district, the schools themselves, the people that work there, and the domestic students will all be better for it, but you will absorb an awful lot of stuff on the journey through the hurdles and the obstacles to get there, and they never stop. But when you talk to these students and you have those experiences, you gain personally, and I think Sudbury overall does as well. So I could talk for 4 more hours, but I'm going to stop there and ask if you have any questions for me.
Through you, Madam Chair, President Best, I have to say your message here tonight is inspirational to me. And as I just had the opportunity to be at our own Barrydown College about a month ago. We were there for a volunteer luncheon. And what you've mentioned in terms of creating an international culture, I did witness it in the hallways, in the stairwells, groups of kids sitting together in smaller discussion groups all over the campus. And believe me, I do walk all over the campus because no matter how many times I've been at Barrydown, I get lost in the hallways. So I wandered quite a bit of the campus that day, and I saw that in action. So I just want to say your words are very inspirational, and I'm looking for opportunity. I know there are some, and you've mentioned it before, and we've talked on the stage at Barrydown Grad before about the number of things that we do together as partners. And of course, there's Barrydown College, there's the dual credit programs, there's the skill competitions, there's many, many things, and we're very appreciative for all those partnership opportunities. But I'm just wondering if there are opportunities here for us to work together, whether we are obviously going to learn from your experience, but if we can do things like piggybacking on trips or that kind of thing, I'm looking for all kinds of opportunities where we can do this together. Thank you.
Yeah, so respond? Yeah. Okay, so I think what's interesting, and as I stand here, not only as a guest to bring our story, but moving into mode of partner, I think we really need to understand where you're going. Without where you're going set, we can give you a trip, but I can't guarantee you'll gain anything beyond that experience. And once again, it's not cheap. So as a result, I think that, we would be very pleased to help work through with you as a no-cost consultant as to help you with where your journey may take you. And then, because a partnership really is a mutually benefiting experience. And so as a result, we need to understand where that is. More than happy to share where we're going and what we're doing. We made a commitment to South America 3 years ago. We used to have 3-4 students. I call them occasional, accidental international students. You have no idea why they're there. You have no idea how they responded. We have no idea why they applied, but we have them, and we have no idea if we'd ever get anybody again from there. We switched from that in South America to now we're closing in on 100. And our recent section of tour that went through, we had 400 people interested in coming to a 200 space information session. And of course, that was sent back to me. I said, we'll just pack them all up and bring them. But the reality is that you've got to know where you're going and why. I mean, we're experiencing diversification, trying to think of the Philippines, Vietnam, because what you're subject to is the challenge that if there's anything that happens in terms of international dynamics, borders can be closed, both from a Canadian perspective, but also from an international perspective. And you don't want to have all your proverbial eggs in one basket in terms of where you're going and what you're doing. So I think that if you want help trying to figure out where that is, of course, it's got to be yours. I'm more than happy to help personally even, but I think that then we'll know what those partnership opportunities might be, because you don't want to go to a country if in reality you haven't thought through, well, why are we here? Because you also have to have the supports. Countries that are primary English speaking versus English as a second language, English is a third language they must learn to come. And what's interesting about India is that most regions have multiple languages, but English is a language that goes through all difference. Philippines is a similar type situation because, you know, ESL is a whole nother game. Yeah, so you don't have to be in the ESL market but you do have to choose your countries from an educated perspective of where you want to go. You're welcome.
Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dewar. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I really appreciated the focus on internationalization, which I think is so important. I was lucky enough growing up in Australia and going to university there in Melbourne to go to an internationalized college back in the 90s. And when I moved into the corporate environment and worked for a global company that worked 24/7, so literally our networks would switch over to different countries every few hours, it certainly meant that you had that ability to deal with those icebreaker situations and have that commonality. And certainly I have relationships that I built back then that I still maintain today, and it's so much easier today with social media and more people traveling to do that sort of thing. So I really appreciated that, and totally on board with that we need to have a comprehensive strategy. I feel that that's what's been missing from our program so far. We would get, we would talk about numbers and briefly mention that the benefits to students of having that global perspective, but I feel like that really needs to be expanded as all the different things that you covered on. So I look forward to seeing the results of staff working with Cambrian, because I really do see some exciting things happening in that area. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the message, don't talk about the money, don't talk about the numbers. If you're doing a good job, both will come. Right? I mean, it really does play out that way. And I know it's counterintuitive from board oversight. I have all the same conversations with my board. And what I basically say is, I'll provide you evidence of progress as opposed to making up a number. So we're going to increase, and I say it this blatantly, I mean, I can make up a number, we'll increase international by 5%. Well, how'd you come up with that, Bill? I just made it up right now, right? Because in the dynamics of an international environment, you don't know. So it's right down to visa approval rates. We had one spike where visa approval rates went from 60% to 90%. We did nothing. It was totally out of our control. And so you have to accept the fact that you are not in control of the students coming. You're only in control of what you're going to do when you get them and where and why you're doing what you're doing. And that's different than domestic, right? That it's such a different thought process that it spins your whole paradigm totally around. And I go back to, if you haven't experienced it, you got to kind of let go and go, okay, I really don't know. And that's what I know I did, and but you have to pursue that knowledge through experience and admitting, you know what, we just kind of didn't know what we were doing right there, and now we know what we did wrong, and let's fix it. And just not repeat it. And but I'm really happy you shared your internationalization experience, because it changes everything, the way that people look at the world. So, yeah.
And I just wanted to mention that you didn't learn how to bowl, you learned how to bowl for cricket.
Yeah, I know. It's my Nova Scotia accent.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Best, I want to say thank you very much once again. I truly believe that we have an excellent partnership between Rainbow District School Board and Cambrian. And part of the reason that partnership exists and works so well is that we have the same focus. Student focused. And now we're going to add internationalization as part of that student focus. And it's because of what you've told us this evening. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
for your knowledge.
My pleasure. And as a good consultant, I get to just leave. So.
So just carrying on where Bill left off. June 9th, 2015, the Ontario Ministry of Education unveiled its strategy for kindergarten to grade 12 international education in Ontario. And this strategy is part of an expanded vision of the 21st century learner, one that focuses on global citizenship and intercultural competencies. According to the 2013 data from Citizenship and Immigration Canada, Ontario has the largest share of international students in Canada. More than 126,000 international students study at all levels in both public and private institutions. Approximately 19,000 students are in kindergarten to grade 12 schools. The Government of Canada has set a target to have 45,000 international students by 2022. The number of international students coming to Canada has increased by 51% since 2007, at a rate faster than any other country. Canada's share of the global market has increased from 4.5% to 5% since 2004, while the American share has seen its share fall from 23% to 16% in the same period. I'm sure you're wondering why. International education, according to the Ministry of Education, has 5 interconnected components. Ontario students expanding their global awareness, knowledge, and perspectives. International students coming to Ontario. Educators sharing expertise at home and abroad. The internationalization of the curriculum and the learning environment. And finally, the overseas delivery of the Ontario curriculum. At this point, I'm going to bring up our international lead, Melanie Bertrand.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to speak a little bit about our recruitment history as we've embarked on this international education journey. This is going back 3 years. So in 2016-17, we started, along with Principal Jeff McKibben and Superintendent Judy Noble, we traveled to China and Vietnam on our first recruitment mission. This was based on market research and advice from our trusted colleagues across the country. China was recommended as a good entry point simply because the number of students who wished to study in Canada. Right, guys? This mission was especially successful because we didn't just meet agents, we went into schools and we met students and teachers and parents. And we developed some partnerships with those folks, in addition to, of course, agents that help us do the things that we need to do to get international students here, which is visa applications. After we were in China for a couple of weeks, we went to Vietnam. And again, the same mission based on advice and research. And we learned about an emerging market, what an emerging market looks like. So Vietnam being advancing into a middle-class economy is very interesting in terms of international education from K to 12 and beyond. And there we met with trade commissioners, agents, and parents We had our first agent training session, actually, which was really interesting, because you are training people who can speak about your program abroad. And we knew when we left there that we would have to return, as President Best mentioned, because this is really about relationships and deepening the trust that our partners have in what we offer the students that they bring to Canada, to Sudbury. The following year, this 2017-18 now, we went again to China, and this time South Korea, alongside or in the same adventure. The visit to China was again to strengthen those relationships that were previously built, that deepened those partnerships. We were in Hangzhou and Shanghai and Ningbo, and we met with consular officials. And then when we were moving from our Chinese visit, we went to South Korea. South Korea presented itself to us as a market because we had attended a recruitment fair back in 2015. And at that time, an agent approached us from Canada, in fact, who has offices in both countries, and he thought it would be valuable to work together. We've had one student from South Korea in our program thus far, and we're going to continue to explore that. Our partnership with Cambrian College, very generously, they've encouraged us to explore that market in India. So together in 2017-18, with the Indo-Canadian Association, that we sent a mission to India involving Jeff McKibben and Bela Ravi, and a gentleman by the name of T.V. Thomas, who is an agent that works with Cambrian College. They met school principals interested in sending students to Canada, and the trade commissioner. Although all these pieces were in place, the plan to move forward with recruitment in India has come to a standstill, unfortunately. There's a barrier that we can't penetrate. Although study permits for college level students are approved in plenty, they do not approve them at this time for students in K-12. There's the will and the desire for families and the financial means for families to send their students to high school or elementary school here, but the Canadian officials will not grant them study permits. Finally, last January, as the sole representative this time for Rainbow, I went to Vietnam, back to Vietnam, on a mission with my Ontario colleagues, so from this organization called Ontario Association of School Districts International. This was fantastic. It was very helpful in deepening the trust with these people that I'd met the first time and then developing new partnerships. As a result, we've just established a new agreement with an agent who lives now in New Brunswick, so an office in Ho Chi Minh City, office in New Brunswick, and we've just sent an acceptance letter to a grade 10 Vietnamese student who will be studying at Lockerbie in September. This brings us to this year's recruitment. A little bit different this year. We've had some significant challenges, to be honest. As Principal Jeff McKibben retired last June, our recruitment team was diminished by half. And additionally, recruitment plans in China were put on hold due to some foreign relations issues and some travel bans. That doesn't mean that we will not accept students from China. It just means that at this time, we're not going to go to the country and actively recruit on the ground. Based on advice then, having had these little problems, based on advice from our Ontario Association and from the market research that we trust, we focused our attention in Japan. We are a licensed EduCanada partner, which means that we're permitted to attend global affairs events and EduCanada student fairs. So we did so in Tokyo in March. This allowed for the first time, a different kind of experience for recruitment, direct access to families. So students, it was wonderful to meet children and kids who are really excited about learning about a place where they may study, and they come with their whole family in tow, and you meet them in an EduCanada pavilion. And as a result, we have some interest from Japanese families, from agents, from schools who want to come and partner with us as an exchange partner. And this is a long commitment. So Japanese families typically plan 2 years away. So they are thinking about sending their children in 2 years from our trip in March in 2019. So on the screen, you will see not Cambrian College's numbers, that's for sure, not in the hundreds. We are fledgling and growing, as you can see on the screen, from our 3 years into this recruitment. And we've grown. So the good news is you see that we are retaining our students. You've met some of my friends that I'll introduce a little bit later before. I think that's important to note because that means we're taking good care of them, as President Best said is essential. But we've also diversified a little bit in terms of the countries that we're seeing join us here for education, and that also is what President Best emphasized, the diversity piece. So you'll see that there are students from currently in this year, China, South Korea, Vietnam, India, and short-term stays, which is new. We didn't talk about this last year when we visited. We have short-term students from Germany, Hong Kong, and Thailand. Short-term students will stay anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months to get a more of immersive and like a cultural immersion rather than a credit experience. All right, the best, as again, President Best said it, the best marketing and recruitment tool that we have is word of mouth, which is highly dependent on the care and concern that we provide to students in our schools and in our community. So we've worked hard to establish these symbiotic partnerships and relationships with the agencies and organizations listed on the screen. For example, the YMCA offers settlement services such as language supports to newcomers and social activities to newcomers and international students. For the gentleman sitting to my left here, and I think probably Adeline over farther, have gone to events that have been advertised through our partners so they can celebrate their, say, Chinese New Year. Okay. The City of Sudbury is engaged and partnered with us to highlight Sudbury as an international education destination. The Multicultural Folk Arts Association and the Indo-Canadian Association provide supports for our staff. Sometimes we need translators. They help. And they offer community connections in the form of language classes and other informal experiences that will enhance learning and make students feel welcome. Cambrian in particular has been a recruitment partner as we explore that market in India, while Laurentian has been a partner in our recruitment in China. And they also provide summer camp opportunities for students who don't want to travel home throughout the summer months, but they want to stay in Sudbury, and they can do so on the Laurentian campus. And this year, as Superintendent Noble will tell you about, our community connections have gone beyond recruitment with the recent influx of other newcomers.
So recently, the YMCA Settlement Services has shared that between April 1st and May 31st of this year, so with a month and a half period, Sudbury has welcomed 57 refugee claimants, and more are expected. This compares to 66 refugee claimant families that were welcomed from October 2018 to March 2019. So within a month and a half period, we are almost at the same as you saw for most of last year. To put this in context, refugee families in Toronto shelters are being provided urgent housing in Sudbury, as we have a high number of available dwellings for larger families. As a result, Greater Sudbury is considered a favorable settlement destination for refugees. What follows is an influx of school-aged children into Rainbow schools throughout the school year. As a result, the infrastructure that we have put in place through Rainbow International has allowed for the successful welcome and integration of new students and their families from around the world. As we speak, now, we are anticipating the placement of 42 children into elementary schools across the city of Greater Sudbury before the end of June. With this influx of enrollment comes a lot of challenges. For example, English language learning needs are increasing, as well as the needs for intercultural professional learning. Rainbow International, MEL, sits on the board of the local immigration partnership. And through this partnership, we have played a role in the application for a northern immigration pilot project. Should the Sudbury region be granted this pilot, we can anticipate up to 500 newcomer families to our schools over the next 5 years. We are very much looking forward to this approval and the subsequent internationalization of our classrooms and schools that comes with this new student enrollment. As of the beginning of June 2019, so a week ago or more, there are currently 312 students present in Rainbow schools coming to us from around the world. As you can see on the slide, aside from the 12 students recruited to come to Rainbow International, we have 26 students in our classrooms who have parents who have been recruited to attend post-secondary school here in the city of Greater Sudbury. So either they are students at Laurentian or they are students at Cambrian. It is the parents in these cases who are on the student visas. The Ministry of Education funds the children of these parents. Where am I? They fund them the same as domestic students. Just a second, I've lost myself. The same as they fund domestic students. There are also 39 children of parents who are here on a work visa. Again, these children are as well funded directly by the Ministry of Education. And by the way, we have registered 23 children of refugee parents since April 15th. We've already registered 23, and we're expecting about 42 more. Finally, we have 160 children of parents who are permanent residents. Someone who makes a refugee claim in Canada does not become a permanent resident at that time. To become a permanent resident, the Immigration and Refugee Board must first approve their claim, and then they must apply for and obtain permanent resident status. This slide shows the distribution of these international students across our elementary schools. So you can see in some cases we have 1 student. In some other cases, like McLeod, you might have 74 students. I'll give you a second to look through where those students are. This slide shows the distribution of our international secondary school age children across the Rainbow District School Board. Again, some schools you can have 1 student, other schools like Llewellyn, you can have 32. This slide demonstrates the total costs versus revenues. If you total the costs on the left-hand side of the slide, you will see that all the investment in the infrastructure, including recruitment, marketing, and bare bones staffing, totals $275,677. The tuition that we have brought in is shown on the right, and that equals $264,100. Essentially, we have broken even. 2016-17 was the first year of recruitment, making this, the 2018-19 school year, the 3rd year of active recruitment for the international program. As you can see, we essentially have enough of a net to pay off year 1, as was suggested would be the case. The bonus you can see is that the infrastructure is in place to build supports for refugee students, the children of permanent residents, children of parents on work visas, and for students whose parents are post-secondary international students. Moving forward, as you can see with the sheer number of students in our classrooms, we are going to have to provide professional learning for teachers around trauma-informed classrooms, as many of these refugees are coming from war-torn countries, around supporting students in classrooms with English language learning needs, and around providing culturally inclusive pedagogy.
As important as numbers and data are, the whole picture is only seen when we add student experience, which is my favorite thing to talk about if you've met me before. So last June, we captured some student voice in a short video produced by an intern who was working with, I believe, Nicole or Jen. Nicole? Yeah. You'll see some of the students we have here tonight on the screen talking about their experiences at Rainbow International, and then we'll hear right from some of our in-person testimonies as well. Yes. Yes. If I touch this, will it work? Yes, it does. Okay. Play. Oh. Arrow. Thanks, George. Always saving me.
My name is Yixi.
My name is Bokai.
My name is Henry.
My name is Henry. I come from China.
I'm from China.
I'm from China.
I'm from China.
我的名字叫雷玉熙。我来加拿大已经有差不多有4年了。然后我是广东人，然后我住在广州。
我叫尚博凯，然后我来自中国青岛，然后我已经来这学习1年多了，将近1年半。
你好，我来自中国，我的名字叫 Hank。我住在浙江。
So the first thing is of course, the full English environment, which helps me to get used to the university. And the second one is the IB program they provide, and like I can get IB certificates, which also helps for the university. And then also the last one, which is the robotics program, and it's also because I signed up for the mechanical engineering, and the robotics helps for that program a lot.
I come here half years, and I learn a lot of new things, such as the Canadian history and new instrument.
I tried doing more reading practice to improve my English, and talk to somebody, make some friends. It can help me improve my English. And I also found a tutor to help me improve my English.
I come here, I learn about some new things, like music. I never learn flute.
Touch, game,
Physics,
Philosophy, music,
geography.
anime.
robotics, culture,
Cooking.
Movies, code,
homework, people. I went to
Thank you. I watched that video, I don't know how many times, and I love it more every time because it's so genuine. So up on the screen here, you'll see that there are two students pictured. One's name is Candace, and the other's name is Hank. And Candace was going to come tonight, actually, but unfortunately, she's still in Toronto. I think I'm getting feedback here. As she is searching for a condo. Something's happening with that, eh? Just like that? Is that good? With her family, as she's off to U of T next year to study post-secondary, doing social sciences at U of T. So she's still shopping for a condo, Bokai tells me. So her experience here is important because Candace Candace was recruited by our co-terminus board, and last July came to see me with her host mom. And they came to me at Llewellyn Park because they know about our good reputation, that Rainbow International and Rainbow schools in general will take good care of the students that we serve. And so they explained the situation. Can we register with you? Absolutely. And she's had a marvelous year. A little shy at first, as all students who are new to a place, whether they're domestic or foreign, it's a challenge to have a transition. And she did a very good job in her transition to being integrated into the school. And just last month won, by virtue of the judges from the Sudbury Theatre Centre, an award for her, it's called a maquette, or a mini set design. So she's very creative and artistic, and I think she was really able to demonstrate that in our school this year. Hank, on the right, was very shy. And you see him, the picture I chose is purposeful because for a long time, Hank would sit by himself or with some friends and look at his phone or his computer. And now, after a full year and a half of being a Rainbow student, and he'll return next year, he's finishing grade 10, he is involved, and he is there exhibiting his table tennis prowess, his favorite thing to do during lunch. But most importantly, his English language skills have developed so well, he can have real friendships with people now. When I asked him, Hank, what was the biggest challenge for you coming to this country? And he said, the culture. I don't play hockey, and I don't know what to talk about sometimes with people, and that's fair, right? As President Best said, it is, come down on an airplane, and you're in Sudbury, Ontario, and so, and now we see through our care and concern and the good friends and staff, the growth of a student. So. In line with that internationalization piece, and as we noted earlier, the education strategy in Ontario's interest in that global competency development, we know that these are also connected to the 21st century learner that we talk about as educators. And in the graphic above, you can see that one of those key competencies is cultural and global citizenship, which we must engage in as we work and learn in a global village. So tonight we have a couple of people to speak about that. Ms. Kelly Darling, who's the program leader of English at Llewellyn Park, is here to explain how valuable it is for our domestic students to learn alongside students from afar, whether they are international recruited students or newcomers. The value is the same. It's that internationalization goal. Okay, Kelly?
Hello, everyone. So I was thinking about the question, what is the value in having domestic students learning alongside international students? And I thought the best way to answer this from my perspective might be to give you two concrete examples. The first one involves Yixi, who you saw in the video, who was in my grade 12 university English class last year. And I was recalling a presentation that he gave to his classmates that was on literary theory. So those of you who remember your literary theory, it's a very complicated subject. And he chose to present about reader response theory. So in a nutshell, that means that every reader brings a different perspective to the text. And this is interesting in terms of Yixi's presentation on that, because his upbringing, his experiences up to that point were vastly different from most of his classmates in the classroom. And so that was just one small example. I could give you many if we had all night of how he was able to bring his unique experiences and his unique perspective into the classroom that really, in a way that really benefited the other students. And I felt like I learned a lot that day, and I know that the grade 12 students in the room felt the same way based on their comments and questions. Another example involves Adeline, who was in my grade 9 drama class last year when she was new to Canada, new to Sudbury. And alongside with Adeline, we had another newcomer to Canada who was in the same grade 9 drama class. And so now, not speaking about an international student, which is the case with the XE, but in speaking to newcomers to Canada who are both learning English at the same time as learning the subject, it was a very interesting and wonderful opportunity for our Canadian students to learn alongside these two wonderful girls. And they are wonderful. I can't say enough nice things about Adeline. Because everybody in the drama studio needed to figure out, how can we all make sure everybody knows what's going on all the time? And so it being a drama class, it's not exactly the same thing as an English class or a science class. And there's a lot of action involved and a lot of interactive things, including mime, et cetera, drama class. And I think that the Canadian students, the previously living in Canada students, as well as our newcomers, needed to figure out ways together to make sure that everybody was involved all the time. And I saw just wonderful growth with both our newcomers and our Canadian-born students in terms of really improving their communication skills with one another. And although shy at first, I think that by the end of the term, everybody in the class was very happy to work together and be full participants. And that's the change in just one semester, keep in mind. So I think that's also, just as a side note, one of the benefits of getting our English language learners into classes that are very hands-on and based on doing and interacting and playing and those sorts of things, just to get the everyday language skills developed. Another thing I was thinking about was, how does having international students in my classroom impact the classroom, generally speaking? And I would just say everyone benefits. I think the teachers benefit from having access to ideas and perspectives and ways of doing things and ways of looking at issues and ideas. I think teachers benefit from that, but far more importantly, obviously, all of the students in the room benefit from a variety and a diversity of perspectives. When it comes down to anything from doing a mime scene in a grade 9 drama class to talking about pretty heavy issues in terms of really diving into literary aspects in an English class, for example, the entire room is a better place when we have voices of diverse and international students in that room. Little side note, I did some interviews with some of our international students last year and our newcomer students, and this was a quote from one of our newcomer students. And I asked, her name is Jessica, and I asked her, Jessica, she was new to us from the Philippines, what is one thing you would like all of your teachers to know about you? Just right off the top, what's the one thing that would benefit your teachers to know? And she said, I want them all to know how smart I am. Which I thought was awesome because without being able to speak English as fluently as some of her peers, that can sometimes be something that is definitely overlooked. And let me tell you, she is very smart. I'm glad she told me that as one of the first things about her, because it was really true. Sometimes there can be some hurdles, particularly when we're talking about supporting English language learners in our classrooms. As a program leader, I've also had the opportunity to try to help support some of my colleagues in making appropriate accommodations for our English language learners in our classrooms. And this has not always been easy, so I would just like to echo what Superintendent Noble said moments ago about the need for increased teacher training around some of the issues that come with an increased internationalization in our classrooms, both in terms of supporting trauma-informed classrooms, but also really more learning on behalf of the teachers needs to happen, in my humble opinion, in terms of supporting English as a second language and supporting English language learners. I'm lucky enough to have taken ESL Part 1, so I have a little bit of knowledge that I can share, but that's certainly not a common additional qualification that we see for teachers in our board. I hope that it becomes more common as we move forward. I've also been thinking about how does being a teacher, both international students and newcomers, influence my practice as a teacher. And I would just like to say that it encourages all of us who are working with newcomers and international students to just really raise our game. Because if you have a student in the room who doesn't understand what you're saying, you have to be pretty creative. And this is good practice, and it's a fun challenge to try to meet the needs of everybody in the room and make sure that you're supporting everyone's learning. So I would just say that I feel like it has really made me a better teacher, having the opportunity to work with international students and newcomers as well. So I feel really fortunate to have had that opportunity. I also want to say it's been a lot of fun. Finally, I've also had the opportunity as a mom to have my children enrolled in a school abroad. We were lucky enough to go spend a semester in Paris because of my husband's work, and my children were enrolled in a school there. And they were 8 and 5 at the time, and now my daughter's 10, and I wanted to speak about her because she still keeps in contact with some of her Parisian friends, and came home with a new appreciation of her education right here within the Rainbow District School Board. Things are quite different there, and I think that having that experience, that international experience, and seeing that as a mom as well as a teacher, I just can't say enough good things about it, and I can't wait to hear what the students have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly mentioned Adeline Ye, who moved here with her family from Shanghai. Well, she was born in Shanghai and lived in various other smaller cities in China, not small by our standards. And she arrived in Sudbury as a newcomer in grade 9. And she's going to just talk for a few minutes about what her experience has been and what other students can learn from her in a classroom. And she's still a little bit shy, but less so. So I'll stand up here with her while she talks to you. Come on up here.
So, hi everyone. Like in response to Miss Darling's like feelings about me, like drama was very hard for me at first because like I was very shy. I'm just saying, and as a newcomer to Sudbury, I actually learned a lot of things, like, and tried things that I never tried before. So like, because in China, like, classes are different. They focus on science, math, language the most. But like in here, I can choose so many electives classes. So like business, music, arts, and drama, and they're all new for me. So and I'm very glad to learn those classes, like, and to actually learn new things. And I tried so many of my firsts here, for example, volunteering here, because I never volunteered before. Plus, I like how the schools here focus on the presentation skills. So like, compared to who I was at first when I came here, I just can't speak. I can't. Like, especially in drama, in my first semester, I was very confused about like what everyone was trying to say to me. And Miss Darling was very patient to me, so like she explains things very slowly, and in creative ways. So like, action, and like I think people can learn very much things from us, and they can learn from what, they can learn from our work ethics, because like, I have a difficulty with English, so I work harder. So, and they can learn from our work ethic. For example, they can help me with English and history, like those language classes. But in return, I can help them with math or sometimes science. And I think having us in a school and a city can actually show like our city is more accepting towards diversity. And also like for those people who are interested in our culture and language, for example, one of my friends, like one of my best friends here, and she actually did learning Mandarin as a new language for her passion project. She enjoyed learning Mandarin, and I was very happy to help her with that.
Explain to our friends how hard Mandarin is. Very hard. It's very hard. Explain a little bit, like a tiny bit about intonation.
Okay, so
Or maybe say something in Mandarin to everybody.
And so, okay, if I say 我很高兴, and it's 我 means I in China, but like kind of similar sometimes. And 很 is just like very 高兴, happy. So like I'm very happy.
Good. We want to keep you that way.
Okay. Yeah, and having to meet my friends, new friends, and those teachers I really love here. Yeah, yeah, and having so many precious memories in my lifetime till up till this time. Yeah, and I'll try harder, and yes, that's all. Yeah, I'll try harder.
Adeline is exemplary in how she's embraced her time in our community and in our school. And we can talk about, as Ms. Darling said and Mr. President Best said, about the diverse experiences that involve internationalization, from my friend Divin, who plays soccer, a Rwandan refugee who's on the soccer team. It's been a game changer for him. Absolute. It has changed his life. I kid you not. So these are the things that we keep in mind as we talk about recruitment to that end of globalization. So here we are at the end, or just about. This slide, to me, and I have a real sense of personal pride here, because I've been with these boys now for their time, and it was a little bit emotional, actually, as we see our graduates cross the stage, all of our graduates, but in particular students who had to struggle a little bit more to get there. So this is a source of pride for our program, for our staff, and for me personally. We are really, in essence, when we talk about graduating students from Ontario schools, our own in Rainbow here, we're talking about providing opportunity, about opening doors to the future. These students are pursuing lives here in our communities now. They will settle here, they've grown up, and they are now global citizens. And so are the students who've learned alongside them. So some of you might remember Yixi, who Kelly talked about as well. He was in the video. He was our first graduate. And he was one of the first people we brought to speak to you in 2016. He now attends Laurentian University in mechanical engineering. And now we have Tom and Bokai and Candace, who's I said is in Toronto. They crossed our stage this past graduation, and they're all pursuing pathway to, in university in Ontario. So we're just going to have Tom and Bokai share their future plans with us for a moment before we wrap up. Who wants to go first? Oh, Tom, okay. This is Tom Zhang.
Hi, my name is Tom, and I come from China, and I study in Lion Park Science School for 4 years, and I will go to Western University in September to study aviation management. And for my future plan, I hope I can be a pilot, maybe about 5 or 10 years later.
Thank you, Tom. Bokai Sheng.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bokai, and I'm from China, and I will go to University of Toronto this September to study Track 1 engineering, which means I learned general engineering the first year, and I chose specifically the second year. I'm planning to work in Canada, but I'm not sure about the future, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So Tom and Bokai, we were talking a little bit earlier about their challenges when they arrived and their successes, and unanimously we talked about the fact that culture is difficult to adjust to. And so that's a reminder every time for me anyways, and I think the rest of our faculty, about taking really good care of these guys. So as we move forward, we enter our 4th year of international education. And we see that in tandem, our community's international profile is changing rapidly. And this has shifted our efforts to a twofold approach. We are both supportive of our growing newcomer population and intentional in our recruitment of international students who are looking for an excellent education, care, and concern that we provide. To that end, we've moved ahead. We've created an adult non-credit language program for English, which is open to students, to parents who have students attending Rainbow schools. Anybody who needs English language development. So we see that as essential for their support of their children and their homework, their relationships with the teachers and the administrations of the schools their children attend, and they need a certain level of English language to become Canadian citizens. On the recruitment side, we will study market trends. We will explore co-recruitment opportunities. We will collaborate with our partners and colleagues in international education across the country and maintain, I'm proud to say, our excellent reputation as a board that believes in the value of international education and globalization. We thank you so much for your time. I know this is long, but I really appreciate the time and attention. We all do. As we close, we would like to share our Rainbow International promo video. It's only a few minutes, I promise. We launched it in March of 2018, right here in this room. For those trustees who are new, we hope you enjoy your first viewing. It's on our website. It is a hit at recruitment events where I show this video to parents and students. And I do believe it captures the heart and soul of what we offer here, which is outdoors, experiential learning, what you heard is important to our students here, and a sense of family and community that is essential for flourishing. Okay, here we go. I might need George. Maybe not. Oh, no, I don't. I'm good. Thanks, George. Oh, no, so I did need George. Thanks, George. Uh-oh. That's it for volume? That's okay. Pictures are the best part.
Thank you for your attention this evening. I know that was a rather lengthy presentation all in, but Mel and I would be happy to take any questions, and I know that our students would be happy to take questions as well.
Thank you very much. Trustee Cosmerly and then Trustee Morrison. And
Just one comment. I'm so proud of our board for making the decision that we made several years ago, and I'm so proud to see how you've grown this program in such a small period of time. This is not about numbers. This is about ensuring that we are positioning ourselves for the future, that we are helping students position themselves for the future, because this is a global world. Really proud of all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Proud of our students too, who have been brave enough to come abroad, and that requires a great deal of courage. So by extension, we're very proud of you and all of your colleagues, right? Thank you.
Trustee Morrison.
Quick comment through you. First of all, if I could ask a question through you, Madam Chair, of Adeline. I was just curious to see how well does your friend speak Mandarin in a year? Given I'm listening to you speak English and you've only been here a year and a half, does your friend speak Mandarin anywhere near as well?
I mean, yeah, sometimes.
No,
when they get mad at me, so like they were saying Mandarin sarcastically. So sometimes like you are stupid, but like in Mandarin it's like I know like they still love me, but
I think you're being a generous friend, but that's okay. Thank you. And Tom and Bohai, can I say that your English just in the last couple of years too, dramatic improvement. So thank you both again for coming and presenting to us for I think at least the second time. So thank you for both being here. I also, Madam Chair, just want to ditto what Trustee Cosmely, that's well said, so I won't say it again. So thank you, Trustee Cosmely. I want to thank Mel, Ms. Bertrand, and Ms. Darling. I want to thank you both as well. And Mel, I'm looking at you in particular. I think you are then Rainbow International?
Well, yes, I by definition, at the moment, yes.
Right.
But in my heart, yes, I am, very much. I believe in this program. I deeply believe that it's worth our attention, our resources, our commitment, but because of the student piece, because as you know, it's the value of learning that is invaluable to me as an educator that we get from this venture, and that's where it is. And really, I didn't know what President Best was going to say, but I was really happy he said all that, because that's right. He's right. That's how we feel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One last comment. Inspirational as you are. I mean, your passion and commitment to students comes across quite clearly, so thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stringer.
I'd like to also thank the Mel, Kelly, the students, Adeline, Bokai, Tom, for your wonderful sharing of your stories. Adeline, something that you mentioned about precious moments really touched me. Back in the 80s, I was a teacher in what was at the time the largest international school in the world. And in a class of 20, this was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in a class of 20, we would have about 15 different nationalities. And our job as teachers each year was to help all of our students meld into one. And we'd start the year learning about each other's culture, languages, and the memories that I have from those years in the 80s of Ferhat Galapagliori from Turkey, Amal Kutab, who was born in Bethlehem and lived in Cairo, Charlotte Vassett from Norway, Biba Yerva from Sweden. Those opportunities for our students in Rainbow, that's huge. So the idea of moving towards internationalization and globalization for our students in Rainbow, I hugely applaud, and thank you for the work you're doing in that area.
Thank you very much. Trustee DeBozic.
Thank you, Chair. First off, to the students, I'd like to say in my language, Opajechnenam Gabajayat. That means I'm very happy that you came here tonight. Chimigwech, for what you have shared. A great thank you for what you have shared with us tonight. I think that it's truly important, and I'd just like to quickly share an experience that I've had. I was a student in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and my roommate was an international student from China, and his name was Lin. And I spent 3 years living with him and learning about him as he learned about myself and our culture. And we had many great discussions. And what he shared with me coming to Canada was there was a huge sense of fear, of course, coming to a new country, not understanding or ready for what he was going to experience, including cold weather. But we shared a lot in deeper levels, and we came to a point in our relationship where we started to share about our spirituality and beliefs. And our beliefs, spirituality, and culture are very similar to that of our Indigenous people here. And I think that's something that's important to highlight if we're going to these countries. As a result of our relationship at school, he is now married. He has a child to which I'm an honorary godmother to, and we've maintained that connection to this day. So with that being said, the teacher talked about, you know, with bravery, I think the ask for additional teacher training and the trauma-informed places, and I think that's very crucial to a safe learning environment to our international children, but as well as our children who come from remote and northern communities. So I really truly believe that Rainbow Schools does have a model that can be utilized moving forward. And in terms of my experience in high school, and I spoke about this during Superintendent Bruce's presentation last time, in terms of sports. There are no boundaries in sport, and what it does is it creates a sense of belonging, acceptance, to be part of that community. I totally understand when President Best was speaking about that communal sense. That's the background of Indigenous peoples, that communal and not so much individualistic. So I think Rainbow has a lot more to offer in terms of how our international recruitment is evolving. In high school, we had exchange students from Germany and Austria, and we engaged them and said, come play hockey with us, we're all starting, and they became part of our hockey team, you know, and those are our friends, and we still maintain those connections today. So I totally support this. It brings so much diversity, opportunity, and relationships going forward to where we're progressing globally. And I just, in terms of President Best's presentation and the presentation by Rainbow Schools, I wasn't clear in this, and I am new. What exactly is our what and why? And how do we evolve that? And if there's an opportunity, I'd like to be part of that conversation. I think it's there's so much opportunity, and Adeline talked about the science math aspect of it, and I do know that in our local systems we have a huge focus on literacy. So I think it brings great balance in terms of those pedagogies, if you will. So I'd just like to say again, Chimigwech, for being here, sharing, and come back to Sudbury when you're done university.
Which means thank you in Mandarin.
Thank you so much.
So just before you leave, I'd like to kind of piggyback on some of the different statements that were made. And I want to just take a moment and think back to when we first became involved, or first looked at the possibility of this. And I really feel it's time that we acknowledge the fact that our first attempts at internationalization were met with a very small but extremely vocal opponents to this. The opponents actually saw only the finances that would be needed. They really didn't look at internationalization. So I very much appreciate the talk from Mr. Best. And you know, it serves the Rainbow District School Board well that the trustees of the time continued to support and to, in spite of the criticism, to try, but it really speaks highly of the staff who saw what we couldn't make other people see. In other words, there are some things that we do and that we offer that are priceless. And I want to thank the students, not only for choosing Rainbow District School Board as students, but for coming to our board and being part of our teachers, because we learned from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to go do some homework now. I'm going to take these fine young people with me. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
We're going to move along with another presentation, and this one is not to be outdone by the first one. This is also an extremely exciting program, and that is the initiative of our summer programs. Superintendent Noble. And Wachnock. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I promise this one's shorter. Thank you for the opportunity to provide updates on the summer learning opportunities available to Rainbow students. In alignment with our strategic directions, our summer programming has an overall focus to reach minds and touch hearts, providing opportunities for students of all abilities from kindergarten to grade 12 in helping to reach their potential. For the fourth summer, Rainbow Schools will be offering kindergarten camp for students who are enrolled in Year 1 kindergarten in September 2019. The program runs from 9 a.m. to 12 noon and has an outdoor learning component. This year, all Rainbow schools, every Rainbow elementary school, will be tentatively hosting the program for children enrolled at that school, subject to sufficient enrollment. Sites will be finalized by June 21st, 2019 in order to inform parents of the feasibility of the program at each school. Kindergarten Summer Camp Principal Ashley Conley-Caillé is leading this important initiative this year to ensure a smooth transition for our youngest learners. For the 9th summer, Rainbow Schools will offer a summer program funded by the Council of Ontario Directors of Education to support primary and junior students who are currently achieving below the provincial standard. We know these students face a greater risk of summer learning loss, and this program aims to minimize that loss and close learning gaps. Under the leadership of Summer Learning Principal Carrie Wilson, 6 literacy classes will be hosted across Chelmsford Public School, Lansdowne Public School, and Little Current Public School. There will be 2 classes at Lansdowne, 3 classes at Chelmsford, and 1 class at Little Current. Support for mathematics will form the major component of the afternoon recreation, in addition to science, technology, the arts, and physical activity. For the 3rd summer, Rainbow Schools is offering a grade 6, 7, and 8 summer learning program supported by the Learning Outside the School Day Register. The program will once again focus on closing gaps in literacy and numeracy to minimize summer learning loss. Experiential learning opportunities such as coding, cooking, and recreational activities will be incorporated over the 3 weeks. Running at Princess Anne Public School, the program will be facilitated by Richard Duffy, our Intermediate Coordinator of Literacy and Numeracy. For students who are looking to recover failed credits, we'll be offering our secondary summer school program at Sudbury Secondary Adult Day School from July 2nd to July 26th. Courses will be offered from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. and then again from 10:45 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. Course offerings focus primarily on compulsory credits. The primary focus of this program is to consolidate specific learning expectations and to keep students on track to graduate. For students who are looking to reach ahead, we will be offering our e-learning and cooperative education program at Sudbury Secondary Adult Day School from July 2nd to August 2nd. A third cooperative education credit can be earned from August 6th to August 23rd. Because of the nature of these programs, scheduling is flexible. The primary focus of this program is to provide students with additional opportunities for credit accumulation, to keep them engaged in their learning, and to provide opportunities for cooperative education that can sometimes be difficult to schedule within the school year. For students who are looking to earn additional credits or to graduate, we will be offering our dual credit program at Berrytown College from July 2nd to August 2nd. Dual credits will be offered from 8:30 a.m. to 12 noon, and one of the following is senior math, senior English, or the Ontario Secondary School Literacy credit are offered from 12 noon to 3 p.m. The primary focus of this program is to help with students in a position to graduate.
For the past 10 years, Rainbow District School Board has been very proud to offer special education summer programs. This summer is no exception. There will be 2 programs offered for students with special needs. The first one being the program for students with autism spectrum disorder, and the second one being programs for students with social emotional needs. The program for social emotional needs, we will run 2 classes this summer. In the past, we've run 1. Autism Spectrum Disorder Program. The program is designed to support students in the areas of communication, social, fine, and gross motor skills. The staff for this program include a teacher, an educational assistant, and an occupational therapist that we contract through the Children's Treatment Center. There are 8 students in this program, and they range between the ages of 5 to 12 years old. They must have a diagnosis of autism and attend one of our intensive support classrooms. The program is located at Princess Anne Public School, and it runs from July 2nd to July 26th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. daily. It is the system staff that meet for this program to determine who the best candidates are as far as students go. The consultants get together with Colleen, the principal of special education, myself, and we determine which students we would like to invite who we think could most benefit. And then once we've determined who those students are, we extend the invite to parents. The social emotional programs focus on social emotional well-being and self-regulation. The staff for these 2 programs includes 2 teachers, 2 educational assistants, the support of the board-certified behavior analyst, Brian Manahan, a social worker, and a psychologist. There are 18 students for this program who also range between the ages of 5 and 12 years of age. It is located at Jean Hansen Public School, and it runs from July 2nd to July 26th from 8:30 to 3 p.m. daily. Again, the selection of these students is done at a system level, and there are some students in these summer programs that are in our section classes throughout the school year, but not all of them. So if we feel that the students could benefit and the parent is interested in the opportunity, then we gladly accept those students. Much of this program focuses around developing self-regulation, providing opportunities for students to go on excursions, learning what it takes to be out at a location outside of the school environment without a parent, and what the rules and regulations are around those types of activities. So they do learn a lot of skills.
We do have a couple of Indigenous programs available for our students this summer. In partnership with the University of Sudbury, we have a program running from July 2nd to July 4th. This program is open to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous students in grade 7 and 8. The cultural camp will take place at the University of Sudbury, and the goal is to provide an opportunity for students to learn more about the Anishinaabe culture and language and to have an experience at university as part of pathway planning. There is no cost for students to participate, and snacks and lunches will be provided. For the third summer, Indigenous and non-Indigenous students will have the opportunity to earn their career studies and civics citizenship credits with Indigenous-focused curriculum content and experiential learning opportunities. For the first time, this opportunity is also being offered in Sudbury at Lively District Secondary School. It is also important to note that Atikmashing Anishinaabeg and Ondak Omnikoning are funding 2 of the 4 summer school offerings through funding they have received from the Anishinaabeg education system. We are greatly appreciative of their generous support. And that brings to a conclusion the summer programmings that we are offering to our students this summer. Kathy and I are very happy to take any questions.
Trustee Cosmerly and then Trustee Morrison.
Hi, I have 2 questions for you, Superintendent Noble. One is with respect to the kindergarten camp. When you say sufficient registration is required, what would be a sufficient registration?
So I think that you have to take into consideration the size of the incoming kindergarten class. So we know that we may only have 2 incoming junior kindergarten students at Manettville. If we got 100% of the 2 kindergarten students, we would run the program. So I think it's a little bit more of a question of percentages and general interest in the program at each school.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other question. Last year there was an excellent welding program that was offered in Lively. Any idea whether something like that will be offered again this year?
We did apply to be able to run that program this summer, but I think that word got out as to the success of the program, and there was a lot of competition for those dollars this year, and we were not successful in obtaining the money.
Thank you very much. Trustee Morrison.
Through you, Madam Chair. In terms of, again, enrollment in these summer programs, I think most of them are as a result of staff identification.
So
I'm looking for
not so much kindergarten.
No, right. Kindergarten is absolutely interesting.
So
Are any else based just on, if I'm interested, I can sign up?
The secondary programs are all based on, if you're interested, you can sign up. So the code program from grade 1 to grade 5, those are students that have been identified as being below benchmark, and teachers and principals were in communication with parents trying to generate the enrollment for the students who really need the program. The program as well for grades 6, 7, and 8 is based on students who do need the extra supports. So we did go after certain students who do require those summer learning supports.
Thank you. Trustee Stringer.
That's for you, Madam Chair.
You need to turn your there.
Question for you around the
Bajak, Anishinaabe, Kendaswin, Weekend, Mick.
Thank you. Just wondering, that sounds like a really innovative new program. I'm really happy to see it there. Is that, what sort of numbers are we looking at for? Is it going to be able to, allow for 20 students, or?
I'm not sure whether we have 1 or 2 teachers, and therefore the enrollment would be dependent on, so if you had 20 students, you'd have 1 teacher. If you had 40 students, you'd have a second teacher. So I think it's a little bit
So-
enrollment dependent.
It's an opportunity for Manitoulin students, too, that may even have family in Sudbury to have
That's
this sort of
right.
learning taking place over the summer. And
That's right.
that's a wonderful opportunity. The program at Manitoulin Secondary School, is that new this year? The career studies? and
No, this is, my understanding is the second year that we've run this program.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Trustee DeBozic?
Just one question in terms of the credit recovery program available. I see that it's really only available to Sudbury area. I was wondering if there's ever been a possibility to explore that type of program on Manitoulin. I do know with our Indigenous students, a lot of our students are staying for years 5 and 6 without having that opportunity, and with the lack of employment opportunities on the island as it is, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to look at that at a point in time, even with a partnership with one of our Aboriginal institutes, Kengeontek.
So one of the things we realize is that cooperative education on the island is probably is the primary interest of our students. Employment opportunities are significantly greater in the summer than they are during the winter on the island. So for our students who are looking for cooperative education, they have a greater chance of being successful in the summer. So one thing that we've learned as well, even in the summer program, is that requests to go to credit recovery are reduced year after year after year. It has become the smallest part of our summer learning. And the reason for that is student success offers credit recovery all through the year. So for a student, if you fail a credit in semester 1, the school invites the student in semester 2 to recover that credit and hopefully earn another credit. So we try throughout the school year to keep our students caught up in their credits, and so the requests in the summer therefore are greatly minimized. And I know that a lot of students, both in Sudbury and on the island and in Espanola, they're looking for employment opportunities, A, because they can get paid, B, because they can get credits that are hard to get, sometimes in the winter, and C, it's a preference for them to spend their summers that way, as opposed to taking school when they know they can get that credit recovery opportunity during the school year. So each year we actually wonder whether credit recovery summer school is going to run. The numbers dwindle year after year after year. So back to your question, I guess when I was summer school principal probably 15, 20 years ago, we did run summer school between Espanola and the island. We never got very many students, and it was very hard to run. Eventually, we did recognize that cooperative education was a better way to go with our students.
Thank you very much. Well, I thank you very much. This is always a wonderful start to the summer to find out about these programs. And I'm looking forward to the fall when we get a little bit of a rundown or a report on how the programs went during the summer. So thank you so much. Report from the in-camera committee of the whole meeting of the board. There was no committee of the whole meeting, therefore there's no report. Previous minutes, motion that the minutes of the regular board meeting held on May 22nd, 2019 be approved. Moved by Trustee Cosmerly, seconded by Trustee Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. No tenders, reports and recommendations. There are none. New business. Here's the big one, another big item for tonight's meeting. The 2019-2020 budget presentation, and I will call on Superintendent Bazinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Essentially, the trustees have all a hard copy as well as the senior table of the budget presentation. Before I begin tonight's presentation, I want to refer back to the document that is entitled Budget Development Process that was presented and approved at the board in November, at the November 20th, 2018 board meeting. And essentially, this is how we begin our budget process every year. And one of the key assumptions in establishing the dates, naturally, was that the Ministry of Education would continue to provide information to the school boards in a timely manner. And typically, the GSNs have been released by March 31st of each year, which includes general B memos as well as the technical paper, and then EFIS, which is the online education finance information system that all school boards use for processing and preparing their budgets, is released usually 1 or 2 weeks after that in early April. This year was certainly non-traditional in terms of timelines. So given the delays, this year we actually received EFIS first, May 10th of 2019, and we only received the technical paper as well as other B memos describing our funding on May 24th of 2019. So therefore, as a result of those delays, it was necessary to alter these dates, which brings us to this evening's presentation. And on the very first page, you see that we have different dates showing than the document that was presented last November. So therefore, once again, we have 3 meetings related to the budget presentation. We have June 11th, which is this evening, which is the first draft that you will see. We have a meeting scheduled for next week, June 18th, which allows an opportunity to review and to respond to any questions or additional information that may be required. And then we have the board meeting of July 2nd, at which time traditionally the budget has been approved. So in terms of the format and layout of the document, it's very similar to previous years. We always begin by just repeating what is given to us in terms of the vision by the province. And we have not made any updates. This continues on and is still reflective in Ministry of Education website. So there's the 4 pillars in terms of the vision: achieving excellence, ensuring equity, promoting well-being, and enhancing public confidence. I would welcome any questions as we proceed through the presentation at any time. We then follow through and we reiterate our own mission, vision, and values. So our mission of bringing learning to life, enabling students to fulfill their aspirations. Our vision: we are leaders in learning, inspiring success for all students by reaching minds, touching hearts, and then we list all our values. Once again, everything is also aligned with our own strategic directions, which is reaching minds and the associated supports to that, as well as touching hearts and its underlying pillars as well. In terms of limitations that are set by the Ministry of Education, once again, this has simply been updated to reflect current realities. So education funding recognizes that school boards need flexibility to decide how best to allocate resources within their budgets. And I think it's important to just reflect on that note, in that as we go through this document, a lot of time will be spent describing how the Ministry of Education provides funding allocations to us, but within the context of how we operate our board, the board has certain flexibilities as how we will take those allocations and then deliver programs and the supports to our students. So there is a difference between funding allocations and actual operations of the board in terms of programming and supports. And it's important that that distinction is maintained, particularly when we start talking about teacher staffing processes, which is different than funding processes. There are some limitations in terms that it is the province that sets the curriculums and programs that we shall deliver. Class size targets for both elementary and secondary classes are to be met. Funding that is provided for special education shall be used for that purpose, and any unspent funds must be placed in a special education reserve. Funding intended for new schools or additions or for major repairs to schools must be used for those purposes. Unspent funds must be placed in a capital reserve. School board administration governance spending shall not exceed the grant allocations. The last sentence has been revised, so funding under the new priorities and partnership funds, PPFs, must be used as prescribed by the ministry. You'll recall that those used to be called EPOs. Additional limitations set by the ministry: boards must approve budgets that are balanced. The use of reserve funds, which is termed accumulated surplus, to balance the budget is limited to the lesser of the board's accumulated surplus for the preceding year and 1% of the board's operating revenue. For us, the 1% essentially is in the order of magnitude of 1.7 million. Ministry approval is required for the use of reserves that are in excess of these limits prior to final approval of the budget. I'm pleased to announce that this evening, based on these definitions, even though we have a slight draw from the accumulated surplus, we are presenting a balanced budget. I would also like to point out at this time that the cost pressures that we're experiencing are primarily due to the implementation of the school board's efficiency and modernization program that was implemented over several years by the Ministry of Education. Essentially, we have lost an order of magnitude of $4.5 million in funding that has been specifically used to be directed towards our school operations. And given our inability to consolidate our schools as approved by this board in the spring of 2017, as well as by the Ministry of Education, it's really provided us undue difficulties in meeting some of our financial requirements. On that note, we have reached out to the ministry, and I'm pleased to at least provide you with information that next week, the director, myself, we have scheduled a discussion with Joshua Paul, who is one of the assistant deputy ministers responsible for capital programs. So hopefully by the time we meet Tuesday evening of next week, we'll have an update, hopefully good news, on the status of our capital projects.
Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dua. I was just wondering, Superintendent Bazinet, if you could explain the difference between using your accumulated reserve to balance the budget and then any other decisions we might have made throughout the year where we've withdrawn from the accumulated reserve. Like, are those two things treated separately, or is that those funds that we took from the reserve, say for the soccer dome, are they incorporated into the budget, or like?
Essentially,
do you understand my question? Sorry, I'm not.
But no, as we move forward, we will touch on those points. However, in terms of at this point in time, when we speak of a budget approval process, the limitations that are relate to the accumulated surplus are withdrawals of funds from the accumulated surplus to assist in balancing your operating needs. So that's where the focus is from a ministry perspective.
So just to follow up, so if we've previously withdrawn from the accumulated surplus, it's become a part of the budget and it's not a part of that 1% number that we're looking at?
It's not part of the 1%,
okay,
but it's not part of the budget either.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of our own internal established criteria, We certainly, on an annual basis, as we begin to prepare our budgets, review all our current programs with an intent of maintaining those programs and services that are specific to meeting the needs of our board's vision, as well as providing the services and programs to meet student success criteria. In 2018-19, we used the revised budget as our baseline, and the comparisons will be shown in upcoming slides. We would exclude any one-time budgets. There weren't any last year or this year. Therefore, there are none to remove. We would also include any continuation of terms and conditions of employment, typically existing collective agreements, unless they were specified as one time. And we will see that the ministry also, in its updates to GSNs, also needs to provide the funding for any previous commitments as it relates to the labor. We do accommodate and incorporate certain inflationary pressures, statutory increases, of course, the impact of any declining enrollment or change of enrollment, and then we also incorporate special education plan, which was presented and also approved at the board. So in terms of our daily enrollment, when we compare our 18-19 current year revised with what is predicted for upcoming school year, as usual, we are a bit conservative when we do our enrollment projections at this time of year. Therefore, we see a projected decline at the elementary panel equivalent to 146 AD students, regular secondary 146.5, high credit students 3.5 decline, adult day school a decline of 14.5, so an overall decline projected at this time of 310.5 students. In terms of the facilities that we have in operation, essentially the buildings that we operate, for our elementary schools, we have 32 for September 1st, 2019, which is down by 1. We had 33 last year, as we'll no longer be operating MW Moore for the upcoming fiscal year. Secondary schools remain at 9, and we have our administration, so a total of 42 buildings that we operate. We also offer a variety of other programs that are located in a variety of locations. They are listed below, and naturally, the last line is Berrydown College, which operates out of Cambrian College. In terms of the structures of the GSNs, the grants for student needs, they have not changed. Essentially, we have the Pupil Foundation Grant, which is the largest of the grants, and we'll see that when we review the revenue page, which has various components built into it. And then we have the School Foundation Grant, which provides the funding for school administration in terms of principals, vice principals, school secretary, and school office supplies. And then there's a variety of special purpose grants, which are additional funding based on the specifics, many of which have an enrollment component. So this has not changed in terms of structure year over year. So I just want to highlight some of the adjustments to the grants for student needs. And once again, just want to reiterate that when we speak of adjustments within the context of this section, we're talking about changes in how the ministry has altered the formula for funding that it provides to the boards. So in terms of class size and the new teacher job protection, a lot of media attention and a lot of general statements made. Now that we have the detailed information, we can be more specific. And I'll provide some information now and additional information when we review the revenue page. So in terms of class size for kindergarten, funding for teachers remains unchanged. So its funded average class size remains at a funding of 25.57, which is unchanged from last year. They have made a change within this section of the Pupil Foundation grant in how they are funding the number of early childhood educators that are associated with our early learning classrooms. So the ratio is changing from 1.14 FTE to 1 FTE, although they are introducing a new per pupil amount for ECE supply costs. So that did not exist last year. So they made a transfer. Of course, this change is a loss of funding for the board, estimated roughly in the order of $195,000 loss of funding because of this change. For the primary grades, which are grades 1 to 3, before I move on, kindergarten has remained as a board average of 26 in terms of class size. There are some additional details when it comes to actual staffing and some caps. For primary grades 1 to 3, the funded average class size remains the same as last year at 19.8. And once again, the requirements in terms of the regulation is that 90% of your grades 1 to grade 3 must be 20 students or less. There's a 10% flexibility factor where some classes can be 21, 22, or maximum 23. That has not changed. Intermediate, which is grades 4 to 8, in terms of the Pupil Foundation grant, funded average class size has been adjusted from 23.84 to 24.5. And that new 24.5 is applicable to all school boards, whereas in the past there was a variation between the funding for the various school boards. So this is an alignment of all the school boards in terms of the funding as far for the grades 4 to 8. For secondary, grade 9 to 12, once again, one of the largest change is the funded average class size is being adjusted from 22 to 28. And I will provide additional details a little later. So that essentially is a major change for all school boards. And the approach that the ministry has taken is that from my funding calculation perspective in the Pupil Foundation grant, it's as if it is happening in its entirety September 1st, 2019. So it's as if they're taking all the funding away, but then, as I'll describe briefly, they are giving back in terms of this attrition protection funding targeted to classroom teachers. So in terms of the other impacts that are related to class size, within the Pupil Foundation grant, there used to be a component called the secondary programming amount, which used to provide 1.02 staff per 1,000 ADE, and that will no longer be provided in September 2019. So for us, that's equivalent to a loss of roughly 4.1 FTE or $341,000. And once again, just to clarify that when the ministry speaks of FTE, it speaks in terms of funding, benchmark funding, not actual teacher costs. So there's a difference there as well. So these are numbers reflective of benchmark funding. The supported schools allocation benchmarks are being adjusted because of the changes above. It is one area where we did not receive any allocation for secondary schools in the past. However, with the change of going from 22 to 28, we'll see a slight increase and gain a few FTE teachers from that formula change. And the last bullet on this page is, again, to align with the change at secondary schools. They will be adjusting what is termed the supplementary area factor for school facility operations within the school facility and operation renewal grant. And this will be phased in over 5 years. And once again, this is a loss of funding specifically targeted to school operations. So once again, it's compounding an already a challenging situation for our board. And that estimated over the 5 years could have a total impact somewhere in the range of $500,000 to $600,000. At the top of page 12, continuing on, the attrition protection. So the ministry has introduced a new teacher job protection allocation, and they've located within the existing cost adjustment and qualification and experience grant. Although on the revenue page, we've pulled it out so that it's very clear to you what that value is. And it's for up to 4 years to protect classroom teachers impacted by the proposed changes to class sizes and e-learning, because none of the e-learning changes come into effect for September 2019. They're scheduled, if they remain unchanged, to come into effect September 2020, which allows the school boards to phase in the proposed class size changes. And through this 4-year teacher job protection, funding will be provided to top up school boards where the change in funded classroom teachers exceeds the actual attrition or voluntary leaves. And I think it's important to take a moment here and to look at the fact that the ministry is focused on it's changing some of the definition and calculations under the Pupil Foundation grant and the Supported Schools grant for classroom teachers. Therefore, if a board is making changes outside of those definitions, for example, a board decides that it's going to reduce by 1 teacher consultant or coordinator because it wants to take those dollars and shift them into additional paraprofessional support, psychometrists or other, dollar for dollar, which is a board discretionary change, that loss of that teacher coordinator position is not covered under the attrition protection. Therefore, generalized statements of, quote, no teacher shall lose their job that you've heard in the by the ministry, generally speaking, and the media, is actually not a clear statement. Now that we see the way that things are calculated, it's specifically targeted to how the calculation and the funding is for classroom teachers. Therefore, because it's also tied to the attrition rate of a school board, we're very vulnerable as a board as to if that is a very high number, the impact will be hitting the board that much sooner. And once again, I'll provide a little more detail on the revenue page.
Thank you very much, Trustee Morrison.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent of Business. Dennis, just trying to ask this I thought about this at the retirement dinner last week, actually. This will never happen, so I know it's not a realistic scenario. But should we be trying to convince all our secondary teachers not to retire for the next 3 years?
Short answer is yes.
Okay, I just need to understand that, simply put.
But there's it's a short-term strategy because come, quote, year 5,
the piper will eventually have to
if nothing changes, you have to reconcile at that time.
Okay, but I just, for my basic understanding, if none of our high school teachers decided to retire and over the next, which isn't going to happen, but if we convince them not to do that, to stay with us for another 3 years, what I'm really concerned about is course options for kids, because that's what's going to be impacted the fewer teachers you have, course options for kids. So if we could convince them all to stay for 3 years, we would financially be covered, and we'd retain course options for kids. We'd have to pay the piper for it 3 years from now.
Yes, assuming enrollment, we'll say, would remain stable.
Yes, assuming
because you also have to adjust
well,
for
our biggest
enrollment.
funding factor is enrollment, but assuming that remains stable.
That is correct. That's why prior to receiving all the detailed information, boards were unsure as to exactly how would the ministry be looking at this, because we put in the numbers for our attrition. So, of course, if you put in 0 attrition, it generates a number. If you put in very high number,
it generates an audit.
So, pardon?
I bet you it generates an audit.
Oh, well, without a doubt, and that might be coming as well.
Thank you very much, Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dewar. For Superintendent Bazinet, how does our attrition rate compare? Do we know compared to other boards, or whether we're low, high, medium?
We don't compare to other boards because it's of no significance. It is what it is. I don't track numbers year over year unless Superintendent Bourget.
So we don't have a number that's sort of considered normal so that we would know if it's a higher rate that year, or we don't really look at it as what it is?
I will present what it is when I speak about the revenue.
For this
but
year?
For projected for next year.
Okay, thank you.
But I have no context of past years.
Trustee Stringer.
For you, Madam Chair, thank you. So Superintendent Bazinet, when they speak of voluntary leaves in the attrition protection, I'm confused because we have teachers that take personal leaves and then they return. So how does that address having few?
Well, essentially, this is not a static picture. So as time progresses, we're completing EFIS now for the budget. We then do EFIS at revised, which provides additional updates, which could or may not change. And then come September of next year, those who were on leave and then come back could have a reverse effect. So it's a very dynamic, it's not a static picture. And I think in all fairness, this is an entirely new area of calculation, and they've added some additional, what we call schedules within EFIS that we need to now populate, which now generate different numbers. So exactly the mechanics of how everything will work, I think no one really knows for sure. I think what's important and that we do know is not all teacher FTE or jobs fall into this attrition protection funding. And I think that's key as well.
Thank you.
So continuing on this page under special education, one of the announcements is an increased funding under the behavior expertise amount. Essentially, the ministry is saying it's doubling its commitment, and that would allow school boards to hire more professional staff and do additional training, and that would be incorporated into the special ed grant.
Trustee Morrison.
I'm not sure whether to put this through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Bazinet or Superintendent Wachnick, because this, I'm assuming, is in response to what they've done with funding for autistic kids.
I will defer the question to Superintendent Wachnick.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
In terms of other grants for student needs, funding changes. And once again, the three next items that are listed are items in terms of funding that currently exists that will no longer exist September 2019. So there was funding that was termed local priorities funding, which was first established in 17-18. During the last round of collective agreements, it continued into the current year. However, it will expire August 31st of 2019. There's a caveat of subject to any changes as a result of bargaining. However, at this point, there's no expectation. It may be, if there's any change, it becomes a change that occurs once we're into the next fiscal year. So in terms of dollars lost, that represented roughly 1.7 million total. And they did transfer a very small portion of that into the Con Ed and other grants. But essentially the bulk of it, 1.5 million to 1.6, is funding that is no longer there for us next year. And that'll be shown on the revenue page. Within the grants, there was also a cost adjustment allocation, which was built into one of the grants, and that is no longer available come September, and that has a value of roughly $395,000. So that's another loss of funding. Top of page 13, there was funding that was termed the Human Resources Transition Supplement. It was built into the board administration grant. It was to assist boards in processing a lot of the changes as a result of the various remedy payments that need to flow through the boards as a result of the agreements that the province made with the various federations. So that's a loss of roughly $72,000. So under the title of ongoing implementation and other changes, there are some salary increases that are built into the various benchmarks because of prior commitments by the province in terms of increments for the various labor groups, and those are flow through, and those benchmarks have been adjusted for the grants for next year. You'll recall that we spoke in the past about the school foundation grant and how the definition had changed, and now they're adopting a campus definition. And next year, 2019-2020, is the third year of a 4-year in phase-in. And once again, that was a decline in funding. So that continues next year and will continue into 2020 as well. The Rural and Northern Education Fund, the RNEF, is an enhancement or built into the GSNs, and it will continue into next year. And we will see that we will experience a slight increase in that funding, and it applies to 13 of our elementary schools and 3 of our secondary schools. And it is the ministry that tells us which schools it applies to. Under student transportation, they've introduced what they term a stabilization fund, and it will be provided to school boards that run efficient transportation operations, but for which the cost of student transportation exceeds the funding provided for that purpose. And in terms of the efficiency of transportation operations, they're referring to the various consortiums, and certainly pleased to say that the Sudbury Student Services Consortium is ranked at a high rating. Therefore, this stabilization funding would apply to us. Something that's new is termed the International Student Recovery Amount, the ISRA, and essentially beginning next year, for each full-time equivalent international student that we have, our grants will be reduced by $1,300 per student. So that is essentially a clawback by the ministry. For us, estimated next year, somewhere in the order of magnitude of $9,000.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Trustee Morrison.
So on that one, although we were encouraged by the previous government, the expansion for international students, we would still be charging for full recovery of tuition fees, correct? They're reducing our grant because we're getting full funding. We're charging our international students full funding.
Yes, that is correct, and they've also indicated that boards do set their own rates and may consider adjusting those rates. Top of page 14, keeping up with costs, we will see an increase in the benchmarks under student transportation, 4% increase, and for school operations, a 2% for the non-staff portion, which are typically related to utilities and contractual costs. So not the staff portion of school operations. Under capital, good news in that the school condition improvement funding continues into next year, and we'll see on the revenue page it's an increase. And then the school renewal allocation, over the past few years, they had an additional $40 million that they've now essentially absorbed into the benchmark, and that continues into next year, and that has an enrollment component in terms of variation. On page 15, it used to be the page entitled EPOs. So this is now the page entitled Priorities and Partnership Funds, PPF. And typically by March of each year, we would have EPOs announced at the same time of the GSNs. And last year, that was somewhere in the order of 1.8 million. So far this year, what we have been officially told in terms of an actual transfer payment agreement is that there is one PPF called the Curriculum Implementation of Grades 9 and 12 First Nations, Métis, Inuit Studies at a value of just under $31,000. There was an expectation that perhaps by this evening we would have received the announcement on the math strategy, which could be several hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the past, it was somewhere in the order of $700,000, and we're very hopeful that we would have received that information to date. However, such is not the case. And of course, there would be FTE teacher positions or consultants attached particularly to that EPO or PPF. So that is yet to happen. Oh, wrong page. Haven't kept up with my talking. Need an assistant. And I just want to clarify on page 15 that the dollar value has not been incorporated into the revenue or financials because it came after the presentation was essentially in its final moments. So it will be added as we proceed into revised and any new ones that we will hear as well. So we're hoping to see a substantial increase in that value. So in terms of page 16, we provide the personnel complement. And essentially we're comparing our current year, 18-19, actuals to what's projected into next year, 19-20. And it reflects various factors, of course. So under our current column, it would include any staffing that is covered by any of the existing EPOs or other revenues, such as the LPF funding that exists currently, however, it doesn't exist as we move forward. So that's why there are some variation and some changes. And we also have talked about our enrollment estimates are slightly lower, so there's a decline in enrollment. So there's naturally an adjustment in teacher staffing as it relates to just that change. So now we're getting into the staffing. So once again, I want to make sure we'll see that distinction as we review the revenue page, but this is just talking about based on operating our boards and trying to maintain those programs and services and reallocating within all our dollars, this is our projected staff complement. We're certainly hopeful that we will see additional PPFs come through so that we'll see an increase in some of those teacher or even coordinator positions, teacher coordinator positions moving into a revised budget. So for our elementary teachers, when we compare current to projected, we see a slight decline of 5 FTE teachers. Secondary teachers from 330 to just under 321, so a decline of 9.3 FTE teachers. In terms of classroom consultants, from 21 to 17, 3 of the 4 are related to loss of EPO funding, and 1 secondary coordinator position is just a board director exec council decision to reduce by 1 FTE.
Trustee Morrison, excuse me.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, Superintendent Basnet. Dennis, the secondary teacher line in the drop of 9.3, is that reflective of only 9.3 teachers are retiring, or is that 9.3 based on the new funding formula, the new class size averages?
It's based on the fact that loss of EPO funding, declining enrollment,
okay,
and our staffing needs and processes, not directly linked to retirements. And when I get into the revenue page, I think it starts to become a little clearer that we're trying to attach certain definitions in all instances because they don't fit. Because when we do our staffing, we're allocating teachers based on drawing dollars, if you wish, from various grants, not just the Pupil Foundation grant.
And that I get, excuse me if I could, supplementary through you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm just, so this isn't the page where I'm going to see the change in the formula at the provincial level, particularly at secondary. is going to result in X number fewer secondary teachers for Rainbow. This isn't the page I'm going to find that answer.
Being funded. Correct. It's on the revenue page.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we can come back to it if it's still
Okay.
not clear. In terms of our school principals, we see a decline of one school principal with the change in no longer operating M.W. Moore moving forward. So that's one principal less. Our system principals remains the same. A slight increase in our VP. We've added additional administrative component at the very last minute for 2 of our elementary schools. In terms of secretaries, clerks, a slight decrease of 1.5 FTE. There is one less FTE at CVDCS. With the decline in enrollment, they have lost one school secretary, and the other 0.5 is a variety of minor adjustments throughout the system. Under student services, which is a grouping of a lot of our paraprofessionals, a slight increase of 0.8 FTE. No change in our noon hour supervisors. And at this time, early childhood educators predicted a decline of 3 FTE, bearing in mind that every September, once we see our actual enrollment, we adjust accordingly for the enrollment changes in the early learning years, both in terms of teachers and ECEs. For educational assistants, an increase in EAs of 8 FTE. No change for our technicians, which are both library technicians and IT technicians. Slight change, decline of 0.3 FTE for custodial maintenance, again reflective of M.W. Moore as well as minor adjustments elsewhere, and no change in board office complement compared to our current. So a total decline of 14.8 FTE grand total at this point in time. So now we move to page 17, which is a consolidation of all our revenues that we need to operate our schools and departments moving forward into the 1920 fiscal year. So I'll spend a little bit of time on the first 2 rows. So the Pupil Foundation grant, essentially, which is a very large grant for us, we see that based on the changes in the funding, we see it's going to reducing by essentially $6.3 million. So that is a drop. So that change is both as a result of what would happen at the elementary with the declining enrollment and the change in the grades 4 to 8, as well as secondary. So in terms of the way the implementation of that 28-to-1 is being implemented is, had there not been any teacher job protection funding, our board, effective September 1st, would be expected to operate with 52 less secondary teachers funded. So had we had 52 retirements or retirements and leaves, we would have 0 on this job protection line in terms of funding. So that's where they fully implemented the calculation, but then they turn around and they say, how many actual attrition did you have? And for us, for secondary, it's a total of 13 between retirements and leaves. Therefore, we're absorbing, if you wish, of that 52, the first 13 come off the top, and we're being funded through this protection grant of $4.3 million for 39 FTE teachers plus an additional 2 that they label as a flex factor for specialization programming, so 41 teachers that otherwise we would not have funding for.
Trustee Morrison.
So there's 41 teachers we're really hoping stay for 3 more years.
Pardon?
As there's 41 secondary teachers, we're really hoping they stay for 3 more years. And then a few more every year for the next 3 years.
In short,
Okay, thank you.
if everything remains stable, yes. So we can see that is a very large change, and we're grateful, in a sense, that from a funding perspective, we're receiving that additional 4.3 million, which otherwise would have been lost had they not implemented that funding. Notwithstanding the real meaning of what does 28-to-1 mean as you relate it to offerings, course offerings for students, which is very different. So in terms of the other grants, we see fluctuations because of enrollment changes and benchmark adjustments. I won't go through all of them. I will just pinpoint a few. So under the kind of midway, it says geographic circumstances grant, and it has a supported schools allocation, and we see a slight increase of $315,000, and that's where we've picked up a few FTE funded for secondary under that allocation that we currently don't have. One of the larger changes you'll see is right in the middle of the page. It is under the cost adjustment and qualification and experience grant. And essentially, it's not really a fair comparison when you compare one cycle to the next cycle, because that amount is entirely calculated and based on how many teachers you have and where they are on the grids. So as that changes, that grant will fluctuate in accordance, because the intent of the grant is to provide additional funding where you're paying your teachers at a higher rate than the benchmark, but also to the contrary, because you may be paying certain teachers below the benchmark. So the benchmark for next year is in the order of salary is $77,000. It's not, that's rounded, but it's in that order of magnitude, plus the cost of benefits. So we do see an increase in transportation grant or funding, which is great for us overall. And we see that the declining enrollment adjustment has increased significantly, and that's as a result of our predicted drop in enrollment. So again, those offset each other. As we get into revised, hopefully our enrollment is stronger than what we're predicting, and therefore we would see the increases primarily in various grants, but mostly in the Pupil Foundation grant, which is strictly 100% driven by enrollment. Just nearing the bottom, you see the change in the local priorities funding, where current 1.78 million, and that drops to 0, but there are slight offsets in the Con Ed and adult education funding, but very insignificant in comparison. So below the line where it says total operating allocation, we have listed the school renewal, school condition amounts. So we see that school renewal is essentially stable, and we see an increase in the funding for school condition improvement, which is always good news, of $945,000. Debt charges is simply a flow-through to pay off ongoing issues, and that's paid for by the government. When we get below total allocations, we're starting to get into areas of other revenues. So large amount is the First Nation, which is the education service agreement we have with the various communities, and that's estimated at $4.3 million, so relative stability there as well. Other boards are payments for, we share the phys ed Dave Makala coordinator position, therefore we do receive some income from the other boards. Miscellaneous covers a variety of other revenues, the bulk of which are interest that we earn, as well as the permits, the charges for community use, as well as our international tuition fees. Next line for the EPOs, we see that under the current year, 1.3 million, and to date, it's shown as 0, and the new PPF is not added yet. So when we get into our reserve funds, and this is where we start to see some of the plans to use our own internal reserves. So under the student focused, traditionally at this time, we don't show a draw to that reserve. However, because of the motion that was passed as it relates to the sports, multi-use sports facility at LaSalle, it is a significant amount, so we're showing the $1 million because it's being split between current year and next year. So this is talking about next year. And we've adjusted, as we see when we talk about the next page, our opening balance on the reserves. Under special education, we see that we are bringing in essentially the total value of our estimated deferred revenues of 2.6 million. Again, that's not been traditional at this time of year. However, when we looked at the loss primarily in the local priorities funding, which was paying for a lot of staffing, and assess the value of the positions that were held and the services in terms of services and programs to students, we're able to offset changes in FTE by shifting, where applicable, some of those FTE costs, and they're now being covered under special education, both in terms of our in-year grant, which is in the order of 29 million, as well as this additional 2.6 million.
Trustee Morrison.
Through you again to Superintendent Basnet, this one also perhaps is going to end up with Superintendent Wachnick. Just wondering, are itinerant teachers come under the formula? Are they vulnerable through some of the changes that are being made on class size? Are they considered classroom teachers? So our teachers I know they come under the spec ed budget, Kathy, but teacher for the blind and so on. I'm just wondering, are they considered classroom teachers or are they vulnerable?
I'll ask Karen her opinion on that one.
So what they're saying, the definition of classroom teachers, my answer to that would be yes, they are vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree.
And that classroom teachers must have a timetable attached to them or a class. Thank you. So system coordinator, thank you.
Yeah, the system level supports in general become, quote, board discretionary in that sense, therefore not really fall under the classroom teacher definition assigned to a particular school, as Karen said, with a timetable.
And Madam Chair, I apologize. I didn't have a word. I used the term vulnerable, and so I don't mean to imply anything from that, other than the fact that they don't have the same degree of protection. I'm just wondering what definition they're under. Thank you.
And the final component on this page, the last line entitled Accumulated Surplus, we see that under our current revised estimates, we would be adding $273,000 to that reserve. However, the projection to balance our costs is we need to bring in $919,000 from that reserve. So our grand total would be $203,117,000. On our next page, we provide additional information on some of the reserves. So we show the accumulated surplus in terms of the estimated opening balance of 4.3 million, and then the projected draw throughout the course of the next fiscal year of 919,130, and therefore an estimated closing balance in 2020 of $3.39 million. At this point in time, there's nothing in terms of projected withdrawals from retirement gratuities or future benefits, so those remain unchanged. And then we've shown the adjusted opening balance under student focused for this current year, as well as that $1 million, which was on previous page, which would give us a projected August 31st, 2020 balance in student focus of somewhere in the order of 2.5 million. Proceeds of disposition, which is related to the sale of our surplus properties, remains unchanged at this time. It would be available similar in terms of, can be used like SCI capital funding allocation.
Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dewar. So just with regards to the proceeds of disposition, that goes into like a capital reserve? That's what you're...
Yes.
So is that somewhere captured on here, if there's anything else in that reserve, or?
That reserve is been established by virtue of the sale of the surplus properties in the past.
So is that captured somewhere later on, the amount that's in that reserve? I'm just curious.
That amount is 1.4 million.
That's it at the moment. So there's nothing else from previous, that's all been spent. Is that what you're saying?
No, this is the value of the reserve come
that's
September
including what
1st,
we add.
2019.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, of course, we anticipate the sale of MW Moore. So therefore, hopefully we'll be adding tremendous amount of dollars into next year, into that reserve. So then we take all these various amounts and we put them in the form of a graphical, a pictorial, as well as the various amounts, and we show it by object code. So essentially, that's where it becomes clear that the values of our salary and employee benefits is in the order of $152 million. Which, yeah, percentage-wise, it's in the chart there, and essentially you do see the 64 and the 11%. So, and that's very common amongst all our school boards, of course. And then we break down the other various components, and at this point in time, we're not showing anything under educational programs other, or we should actually now change it to PPFs. That's what's anticipated. The next page is the same information, but just displayed by what is known as function codes. And this is where it becomes clear in terms of some of the various areas. And definitely instruction has the bulk of the expense. And we see the various amounts that are associated with each of those other functions. In the very last page, page 21, are the dates, reporting and accountability dates as established by the Ministry of Education, and that's where we see the various financial cycles and how they overlap with each other in terms of timing. That, Madam Chair, concludes the presentation for this evening.
Any further questions? I'm sure that that we will have, hopefully, in time for the next meeting, the strategic planning meeting, we can go home and take a look at this and jot down our questions. And at the strategic planning committee meeting coming up, we will have ample opportunity to take a look at this again in terms of answering questions. I just personally want to point out one thing. It's so significant to me that we had that earlier presentation on international students, in that there was a very clear indication of what happens when you concentrate strictly on finances without any kind of goals or purpose or commitment to education to student well-being, to student-focused initiatives. And when we opened up this page, this booklet, and on the first page, we have a vision for education in Ontario that comes from a previous government. This government significantly does not address a vision for education in this province. This government is addressing finances only, and it doesn't work that way. This is my own personal feeling, but I think as we go through this process, we need to make sure that we advocate, that we bring the difference to the attention of the news media, if we have to, of this government. We have to try to work with this government to, in fact, refocus on education, refocus on students. It's extremely disappointing to me. Superintendent Bazinet, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank all of your staff who work with you to prepare this budget. I've never quite felt quite so uncertain about a budget because of the uncertainties that come out of Queen's Park on a regular basis. So I thank you very much for what you've done, and I encourage all trustees to contact you if they have any further questions, especially if it's questions that require some kind of research, so that at the next meeting when we discuss budget, the answers are readily available. So on that note, if there are no further questions, I will say once again, thank you. Trustee Hunda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of minutes. I do too want to share in thanking all of you. Is it a great story? No, but I can tell you, I think a number of us have been extremely worried where this was all going to lead, and I have to say that I'm a bit relieved tonight. Thank you for all the work that you did to be able to protect both our programs and our staff and what you've been given. I understand that it took a lot of maneuvering and working and last-minute adjustments, but I have to say, overall, I think I was expecting worse, and I'm feeling encouraged that you did a wonderful job to protect what is important to us.
Thank you very much. Request for leave of absence motion that Carrie St. Jean be granted a leave of absence from the June 11th, 2019 board meeting. Moved by Trustee Gibson, seconded by Trustee Hunda. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Director's remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we recently, on June the 5th, at Science North, we were invited for a celebration of our Science Fair winners and our representatives at the National Science Fair. I just have to tell you, I'm so proud of our students. In addition to winning several awards, as you're aware of, they've become huge ambassadors for our board, and more specifically for the schools that they represent. And in addition to being great scientists, all of them have developed into exceptional public speakers. And I know our communications officer, Nicole Charette, was there with me, and she would attest to the fact that these students, over the last couple of years, especially for the repeat winners, they are just exceptional to listen to, and they're able to synthesize some very difficult concepts and make it very, to put it in layman's term, very the awareness and the understanding they're able to project to us is just so incredible, and I'm just so proud of them. You had to have been there. It was just without notes. and to the way they spoke. It was just, and yes, and of course, Trustee Morrison was there too. And so it was just incredible. The other thing is, on June the 6th, several staff from Rainbow Schools attended and emceed the Aboriginal Awards held at the Caruso Club. The event was facilitated by our own Kathy Dokis, Ramona Shawana, Hazel Fox-Ricolet, and Nicholas Bayer, and Don London. Over 500 folks were in attendance, and a special thank you to the United Way and Swakamuck Friendship Center for hosting and sponsoring the event. And thank you for Trustee Dubosky. She was also in attendance. On Friday, June the 7th, we held our last FNAC meeting for this school year. We have finalized the education service agreements, and we are currently coordinating a date for formal signing. Again, a special thanks to Kathy Dokis, Nicole and Nicholas Bayer, and all the FNAC members for putting in the necessary work to arrive at an agreement. We will be providing more details about the signing as soon as possible. Just a reminder about two critical events on our board. That is the Challenge Meet, which is this Thursday. It will be held at Laurentian University. I believe it starts at 10 o'clock. If there's one event you want to attend to during the course of the school year, this is it. Okay, it is just so heartwarming to be a part of that. Of course, everyone is invited. If you show up, sometimes they just put you to work. Otherwise, if you're just a cheerleader, that's awesome too. So again, if you could be there, bring your camera. Secondly, please ensure you respond to any invites to school grads as soon as possible. And of course, if you're double booked, in which many of you will be, some of you triple booked in some cases, we will try to assign an exec staff member as the board rep at the school you're not able to attend. Okay, and so we'll try to facilitate that, but you need to let Heather know so we can make that happen. Also, if you require any communication attachments or supports, if I would ask that you would ask Nicole Charette, and she'd be able to do that for you. Finally, I have the principal and vice principal placements for this year. As you know, I indicated to, I think it was the last board meeting, that we did the interviews, and so today we're announcing those transfers. So again, I'll read them very slowly. Elementary, Principal Ron Hodkinson, who by the way has been in Dubai for the last 2 years, is finally coming home. He will be transferred to Northeastern Elementary School effective August 19th, 2019. For the most part, these are August 19th, okay? So Principal Kim Belanger will be transferred to Churchill Public School. Principal Kendra Mahel transferred to Cyril Varney. Principal James Norrie transferred to Coppercliff Public School. Then we have Vice Principal Brenda Carr appointed as acting principal at Alexander Public School. Vice Principal Dave Sainamore appointed as acting principal of A.B. Ellis. And of course, Vice Principal Christine Pichette transferred to Ernie Checkers Public School. Now you may ask the question why some of these are acting. Again, I just want to remind us that we are still in a position where we have 5 schools that could be consolidated. So we cannot put ourselves in a position where we have permanents. So we need to have several actings. Okay, that doesn't mean they don't deserve it or that they don't have the capacity of a permanent. It's just that we have to recognize that challenge that's still ahead of us. Okay, so that's another side of that confirmation we'll be looking for next Tuesday when we have that discussion with the ministry. As well, we have Emily Caruso Parnell appointed as acting VP at Beatty. That's effective September 3rd. Eric Catano appointed as acting VP at Algonquin Road Public School, effective September 3rd. And Kate McKenzie appointed as acting VP at Adamsdale, effective September 3rd. And of course, at the secondary level, we have Sean Green appointed as acting VP at Sudbury Secondary, effective September 3rd. Just want to highlight 2 pieces. Superintendent Bazinet alluded to them, and they said the 0.5 increase. So that's a 0.25 at Algonquin, which they never had a VP before. That's driven by their enrollment. And then we also have Kate McKenzie. It's a 0.25 at Adamsdale, which is part of a differentiation allocation. So that, Madam Chair, is my report.
Thank you very much. OBSPA delegate.
Nothing. Well, I got more than nothing, because Judy will be going to the AGM this summer. And what's the date? June? Oh, I thought that was the other one, the Canadian one. Oh, that's right, they put it together this time, that's right. Just one note, I guess, they asked me to be alternate VP for the Northern Boards, and so it's a very important job. Nobody else wanted it, so that's where I am. So we'll wait to hear from Judy when she comes back from that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our student trustee.
So last night, our new student senate was elected, and they are outstanding applicants. Half of the words I didn't understand. They were all so smart. It's crazy. Their accomplishments they've already done are like crazy, and they're in grade 10 for most of them. We also had our Stand Up Speak Out conference in May, and I wasn't here to speak on that, so I just wanted to reiterate that it was an amazing day, and the senators put in so much work that they need to be recognized, so I just wanted to say that again. And someone said, oh, aren't you excited that all the hard work's gone? And I mean, one day after, I already miss being stressed out with all the work for that conference, so I miss it already. This is also my second last board meeting, and I'm gonna say it a million times in my last one, but I wanna thank you all for everything you've done this year for me. I know in August when I started, I said, oh, I have a year left of trustee. That's tons of time. Then it turned into, oh, I have a semester left, and now I have weeks left, and I'm very sad about it, but thank you all. That's all.
Thank you, student trustee Hannah. And thank you for doing such a great job, and we certainly appreciate everything you've done this year, and you've been a real bonus for the other students. Thank you. Trustees' remarks or questions? Trustee Cosmerly?
Just one comment that hasn't been brought up yet, one event that's coming up, and that's the Empowering Parents to Raise Resilient Children PIC conference, the Parent Involvement Committee. I drew a blank there. Saturday, June the 22nd from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock at Lockerbie Composite School. Keynote speaker is Dr. Adele LaFrance. Anyone who has heard Dr. LaFrance speak knows how passionate she is about emotion-focused therapy and supporting families and supporting children. And I really hope we get a good turnout. Everything is free. Lunch will be provided. I really hope parents come out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Hunda?
Just really quickly, I'd just like to, at this time of year particularly, send a thank you out to all the staff and that work so very hard in the end of these end of the year functions that come up. I've had the exciting privilege of showing up to the school track meets at Laurentian and then the board track meet. Director Blazik mentioned it. I am very looking forward to the challenge, the board challenge meet this Thursday morning. Honestly, if heartwarming is probably the only word that you can describe it, is to watch these children compete. I'll share with you, my grandson, who will be competing for his second year, said to me, Nan, I'm so glad you came to my track meet at the school, but he said, guess what? And I said, what? And he said, I'm moving on. He said, I'm going to be challenged. I'm getting to go to the challenge one. And he said, can you come? And I said, oh, you betcha, buddy, I'll be there. But in his mind, this is an accomplishment, and this is where he will compete like he did last year in a level that he has a chance. So if any of you have a chance, I just want to thank all the staff for the work they do for that. Sorry. But if you have a chance to show up, I'm going to tell you, you won't regret it. I want to just give a shout out to my buddy here, the Let's Dance assembly was absolutely exceptional. I didn't know going in that a lot of the numbers that were performed were choreographed by the students themselves, including our trustee Hannah here. It was remarkable. I brought I had a date with my granddaughter who was just blown away by all of it. And Oh, and I just want to say that for the first time, I was able to attend the Princess Anne powwow the other day. Aside from being very sunburnt, it was what an exceptional day. My grandchildren, my daughter and I were blown away. So many staff came by, and we had visitors, which was wonderful. We had buses coming in, and it just was a remarkable day, and what a wonderful day of sharing cultures and being taught. And the students were so enthusiastic to join in with all that was being presented by our First Nation leaders. So I want to thank you all.
Thank you very much. Trustee DeBoski?
I just want it noted that on for the strategic planning committee meeting, I won't be in attendance. It's our community school's graduation that night, so our Inchiging First Nation, so I'm required to be there.
Thank you. Sorry, chair's remarks. I want to begin by repeating a comment that I truly believe, and that is June is the most wonderful time of the year, especially in education. June is when we seize the opportunity to recognize student success academically, socially, and emotionally, none of which is possible without the dedication of our outstanding staff. I'm going to ask you to circle your calendars. There's been lots going on, and it's such a wonderful time to be part of that. But I'm looking at what's coming up in the next, we've got so many things crammed into the next few weeks. Tomorrow, Wednesday the 12th, Chelmsford Public School students and staff will present donations from their entrepreneur charity fair to local groups. Area businesses matched what the students raised, bringing the total to $2,200. Norm has already mentioned, Director Blazik has already mentioned the challenge meet. If you possibly have time to stop in, if you want to lift your spirits, be sure to drop in for a generous helping of inspiration from these fine young people. Also on Thursday, June 13th, Lansdowne Public School will host a traditional gathering, so perhaps you can go from one to the other. They're going to be bringing together students, staff, families, and community members to honor our water and Mother Earth. Schools, just a little reminder, schools are closed to students on Friday, June 14th, and because that's the final professional activity day of the school year. Elementary rock bands from Rainbow Schools will be featured at the 11th annual Schools of Rock concert on Tuesday, June the 18th. That's a week from today at 11 a.m. in Sudbury Secondary School's Sheridan Auditorium. Also on Tuesday, June the 18th, R.H. Murray Public School will host a teaching powwow. On Friday, June the 21st, is the registration deadline for kindergarten summer camps. So be sure you get that word out there. Children must be registered to attend school where the program is being offered, and sufficient registration, as we learned in our earlier presentation, is required to ensure the viability of each program. As Trustee Cosmerly mentioned, the 2018-2019 school year will draw to a close with an important conference on mental health. Rainbow District School Board Parent Involvement Committee has received funding from the ministry to present Empowering Parents to Raise Resilient Children. And in today's day and age, we certainly need resiliency. Keynote speaker, as Trustee Cosmerly mentioned, is Dr. Adele LaFrance. That's on Saturday, June 22nd, and as was mentioned, it's a free conference by parents for parents. Takes place from 9 a.m. to 2 at Lockerbie Composite School, and as well as lunch being provided, there is childcare available. So that's important for our parents. Please get that word out if you possibly get the chance to make sure that they know that we will have childcare available. Secondary school exams take place from Monday, June the 24th to Friday, June 28th. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate students on another successful school year, to commend staff for their wonderful work, and to thank parents and guardians for their support. On behalf of the board, I'd like to wish everyone a safe summer. I do have a thought for the month. This one comes from an unknown source. However, it is: a diamond is merely a lump of coal that did well under pressure. Rainbow District School Board has lots of diamonds. Thank you very much. Under information and proposals, we have all of the Special Education Advisory Committee minutes that you can sit and take a quick look at. Future meetings, there is the one Student Senate meeting on June 17th, but once again, I want to especially bring your attention to the Strategic Planning Committee meeting on June the 18th, which is our budget discussion. And then it is very important, if you can possibly manage it, our July 2nd board meeting is extremely important in that is when we will approve the budget, or there will be a motion to approve the budget. Motion that we do now adjourn, moved by Trustee Morrison, seconded by Trustee Hunda. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Have a good evening. And just before we're off, I would like to say thank you to the many people who expressed well wishes while I was recovering. It was much appreciated.